Prologue. Luyan was 31 when the truck hit him. He had been crossing a quiet intersection in the rain on his way back from a late job interview. He had been carrying a black umbrella in one hand and a folder of references in the other. The light had been green. The truck had not stopped. He had a half-second of brake lights against his face before the impact. His last thought, in the rain on the wet asphalt, was that he should have eaten lunch. Then the dark. Then the dark held for a long time. Then his eyes opened on a different ceiling. Part 1. The Boy Who Could Not Train. Chapter 1. The Han Family's Shame. The ceiling was carved cedar, dark with age, lit by a small lamp in a brass holder set into the wall above the bed's headboard. The lamp burned a steady amber. The room smelled of old wood and a thin trace of incense that had gone out hours ago. Luyan sat up slowly. The body sat up faster than his mind expected. He was light. He was, in the slow assessment of his new limbs across the next 30 seconds, lighter than he had ever been. Perhaps 140 pounds on a frame that was nearly 6 feet tall, with the lean, wiry build of a boy who had been training for sports his whole life, and then stopped a year before puberty hit. The hands he lifted in front of his face were long-fingered, smooth, with the precise, unmarked knuckles of someone who had never thrown a punch. The face he found in the brass mirror above the small writing desk in the corner was a boy of 18. The boy was beautiful. Luyan stared at the face for a long count. The face had the kind of bone structure that, in his old life, would have made him a model or an actor or, at the very least, a man whose conference room presence opened doors before he spoke. High cheekbones. A clean, sharp jaw. Eyes the dark color of wet slate, set under straight brows. Skin the pale, even tone of someone who had been kept indoors for years. The face was not his. The face came with memory. He let the memory in slowly, the way he had let any new file in slowly during his old job, as data, not as identity. The body had been Han Wei. Han Wei was 18 years old. Han Wei was the fourth son of Han Tianlong, patriarch of the Han clan, which was one of the 4 great martial families of the eastern capital. Han Wei had 2 older half-brothers from his father's first marriage, Han Yu, the gold medal eldest, and Han Liang, the calculating second, and 1 full older sister, Han Mei, who had died of a fever at 16 when Han Wei was 9. His mother had died with her. Han Wei himself had failed his awakening at age 8. The awakening was the central event of every child's life in this world. At age 8, every child of every family submitted to the official awakening test, a ritual conducted at the city's central temple by the Imperial Martial Registry's senior officials. The ritual measured the child's chi capacity, meridian openness, and elemental affinity. Children who passed any of the 3 measures were registered as awakened and assigned to one of the city's 70 martial academies for the formal training that, by age 20, produced the cultivators who fought the rifts. Children who failed all 3 measures were registered as unawakened. Unawakened children of common families became merchants, scholars, government clerks, factory workers, taxi drivers. There was a place for them. The unawakened life was not glamorous, but it was a life. Unawakened children of noble families had no place. Noble families existed because they fought the rifts. A noble family's standing was measured in the number and rank of its awakened cultivators. An unawakened child was an empty space on the family tree. The child did not bring in resources. The child did not contribute to the family's military strength. The child consumed food, education, and a noble surname without producing anything in return. The child was a shame. Han Wei had been the shame of the Han clan for 10 years. Luyan sat on the bed with the borrowed memories settling slowly in the back of his head and assessed the position he had been dropped into. He was 18. He was, by the body's count, in his last semester at the Capital Martial Academy, where his father's name had bought him admission despite his unawakened status, on the assumption that he would graduate with a paper diploma and a quiet desk job in some Han clan subsidiary. He was bullied at the academy by the sons of the other 3 great families. who had spent 10 years calling him good-for-nothing Han. He was bullied at home by his elder brothers, who treated him as furniture, and by his older cousins, who treated him as a target. His father did not speak to him. His father had not, by the body's count, spoken to him in 3 years. The body had been beaten, the day before Lu Yin arrived, by his cousin Han Ju. The beating had been the cause of the cracked rib Lu Yin felt now under his left side when he shifted his weight on the bed. Han Ju had been 22, fourth-rank cultivator of the Han clan's junior generation, and the family member who had taken it on himself across the past 5 years to ensure that Han Wei never forgot what he was. The beating had been routine. Han Ju had broken the body's rib because the body had failed to bow low enough when Han Ju had entered the courtyard. The body had not reported the beating. The body had crawled into bed at the second hour of morning and fallen into the kind of unconsciousness that, in the borrowed memories, had been close enough to actual death that Han Wei, the previous tenant, had welcomed it. Han Wei had been planning to die. Lu Yin understood this with the cold, quiet clarity of a man reading another man's suicide note. The body's mind, before Lu Yan's arrival, had been holding the small, fixed thought of a particular cliff at the edge of the family compound that opened onto the river 200 feet below. Han Wei had been planning to walk to the cliff at dawn and step off it. The plan had been in the boy's head for the past 3 weeks. The cracked rib had only confirmed the decision. Lu Yin had arrived between the planning and the execution. Han Wei was dead. Lu Yin was here. He sat on the bed in the lamp's amber light, in a beautiful borrowed body with a cracked rib, in a powerful noble family's residence in a modern city whose name he did not yet know, in a world where children with talent fought monsters and children without it were thrown away. He thought about it for perhaps 2 minutes. Then his mouth lifted at the corner. It was not a smile he had owned in his previous life. He had not, in 31 years, smiled in that particular way. The slow private lift of a man who had just been handed a problem whose solution he could already see, in outline, before he had finished reading the brief. He swung his legs off the bed. He stood up. He winced at the rib, breathed through it, and walked across the room to the brass mirror. He looked at the beautiful face in the lamp's amber light. He said, very quietly, in a voice that was higher and softer than his own old voice had been, "All right, Han Wei. Let me tell you what we're going to do." The face in the mirror did not answer. The face in the mirror had, in its dead previous owner's expression, never been anything other than tired and afraid. The expression Lu Yin now wore on it was different. The face had been built by the boy's beautiful bone structure and the cruelty of his 10 years, for the expression Lu Yin was now putting on it. He turned away from the mirror. He sat at the small writing desk. He pulled a sheet of plain rice paper from the drawer, dipped a brush into the inkstone, and began to write a list. The list had 2 columns. The first column was titled People Who Hurt Him. The second was titled Order. By the time the lamp burned down at the 3rd bell of morning, the second column had been filled. The order had been worked out. The first name at the top of the order was Han Ju, cousin. The last name at the bottom of the order was Han Tianlong, father. Between them were 14 other names. Lu Yin blew out the lamp. He went back to bed. He slept for 6 hours, deeply, with the kind of clean, uninterrupted rest he had not had in his previous life since college. When he woke at the first bell of evening, he was hungry. He rang the small brass bell beside the bed. A servant girl arrived 3 minutes later, eyes lowered, bowing at the door. She said, "Young master, what's your name?" She looked up, briefly, surprised at the question. "Meihua, young master. Meihua, bring me food. Whatever the kitchen has. Bring enough for 2 of me. Then come back and tell me which Han clan elders are in the main compound this evening." She stared at him for a moment, perhaps because he had spoken to her at all, perhaps because the body's previous occupant had not eaten more than half a bowl of rice in any sitting for the past 6 months. She bowed again, deeper. She was gone. Lu Yin sat on the edge of the bed. He waited for the food. While he waited, he thought about the body's hidden inheritance. The previous occupant had not known. The previous occupant had taken the awakening test at 8, failed it, and accepted the result. The previous occupant had spent 10 years assuming the test was correct and that he was, by birth, a body the world's martial system could not work with. The test had been wrong. Liu Yin knew the test had been wrong because he could feel, in the borrowed body's chest at the bottom of his ribcage just under the sternum, a small pulsing warmth that had no place in the standard human anatomy he remembered from his old life, and that the body's previous tenant, by the memory's account, had never registered. The warmth was a knot of stored energy. The knot was the body's chi. The body had it. The body had always had it. The test at 8 had not detected it because the test measured chi at the standard meridian openings, the wrist points, the ankle points, the crown, and the body's chi was not stored at any of those points. The body's chi was stored in a single dense knot beneath the sternum, in what Liu Yan's old life chemistry knowledge would have called the cardiac plexus and what the martial system, if it had known, would have called a reverse core. Reverse cores were not in the standard system. Reverse cores were not, in fact, in any of the borrowed body's accumulated education. Han Wei had never heard of them. The Han clan had never heard of them. The Capital Martial Academy had never taught a course on them. The Imperial Martial Registry's official test did not measure them. Liu Yin knew about them because, in his old life, in his early 20s, he had read a paperback novel, a cheap translation of a Chinese cultivation web novel about a young man with a reverse core that he had borrowed from a college roommate and finished on a long train ride and never thought about again until 5 minutes ago. He had thought about it 5 minutes ago because the body's warmth under his sternum had matched the description from the novel exactly. He sat on the bed in the dark and laughed quietly. He had been handed a body whose cultivation method he happened to have read about, in a different life, in a book he had forgotten existed. The coincidence was either extraordinary luck or it was not coincidence at all. He decided, sitting on the bed in the dark, that it did not matter which. What mattered was that he knew how to cultivate the reverse core, and that the body was at this moment a completely undeveloped reverse core practitioner, and that the family that had despised him for 10 years had no idea what was about to happen. Mei Hua came back with the food. He ate. The food was a small bowl of soup, a plate of cold sliced beef, 2 steamed buns, and a half cucumber. He finished all of it in 12 minutes. He drank 3 cups of tea. He sent Mei Hua back to the kitchen for a second plate and finished that too. The previous occupant had been starving for years. Liu Yin was making up for it on the new tenant's first day. When Mei Hua came back to take the dishes, she said, "Young master." "About the elders." "Yes. Patriarch Han Tianlong is at the Eastern Wing this evening. He is in council with Elder Han Bo and Elder Han Si. The council is expected to last until the 3rd bell of night. Second Master Han Liang is in the West Garden with the cousins. Young Master Han Ju is among them. Eldest Master Han Yu is not in the compound. He left for the Northern Rift 2 days ago and is not expected back for 10 days. Liu Yin registered the schedule. He said, "The West Garden. Han Ju. How many cousins are with him?" 3. Han Bin, Han Mo, Han Ju. All 4 are 2nd rank or above. Han Ju is 4th rank. Han Bin and Han Mo are 2nd. Han Ju is 3rd. "Thank you, Mei Hua." She bowed. She turned to leave. At the door she stopped. She did not look back. She said, very quietly, in a voice that did not carry past the doorframe, "Young master, are you going to the West Garden tonight?" He looked at her in the lamp's amber light. He said, "Why do you ask, Mei Hua? If you are, I would prefer to know in advance. I would prefer to have an explanation ready when the servants are asked tomorrow morning for why the young master was seen walking toward the West Garden last night carrying anything." Liu Yin watched her in the lamp. The body's memories did not contain any particular impression of Mei Hua. The body had not paid attention to the servants. The body had been too tired and too afraid to pay attention to anything. The new tenant paid attention. He saw, in the way the servant girl held her shoulders in the doorway, in the careful quiet of her voice, in the fact that she had not turned to look at him while asking the question. A girl who had been watching the body for years, who had registered something in his manner tonight that the body had never produced before, and who was, by her own quiet operational instinct, offering to help him. She was perhaps 16. She had been in the Han household for, by the borrowed memory, finally surfacing, 4 years, since she had been bought at the Eastern slave market at 12 by the household senior steward, on a small administrative footnote that had attached her to the fourth son's personal service because no other member of the household had wanted her. She had been the only servant who had treated Han Wei with anything but contempt. She was, by the borrowed memories accounting, the only person in this compound who had ever, in 10 years, spoken to him with what might in a different context have been called kindness. Luyan looked at her in the lamp. He said, very quietly, "Mei Hua, come back into the room. Close the door." She came back. She closed the door. He said, "I am going to the West Garden tonight. I will not be carrying anything. I would prefer that the household, when asked tomorrow morning, knows that the young master spent the entire evening in his room with a fever and asked the kitchen for 2 bowls of soup. The fever was the result of the beating from Master Hanju yesterday. The fever kept the young master in bed until the 3rd bell of morning. The fever broke at dawn. Can you arrange the household's understanding to match that account?" She looked at him. She did not speak for a long count. She said, finally, "I can. I will tell the kitchen the young master required additional soup tonight because of the fever. I will tell the corridor watchman that the young master rang for me twice during the night. I will sit in the corridor outside the young master's door from the 2nd bell to the 4th so that the watchman will see me there and remember it tomorrow. The household will understand the young master spent the night in his bed. Mei Hua, young master, why are you doing this?" She looked at him in the lamp. She said, very quietly, "Because the young master spoke to me by name. The young master has not, in 4 years, spoken to any servant by name. The young master who is in this room tonight is not the young master I have served for 4 years. I do not know what has changed. I do not need to know. I am, young master, choosing to be on the side of the change. I am asking you, in exchange, to remember that I chose to be on this side tonight, before you had asked me to." Luyan looked at her. He said, "I will remember." She bowed. She left. He sat in the dark for another count, finished the last of his tea, and stood up. He went to the small chest beside the writing desk. He opened it. He took out the body's plainest dark robe, a winter robe of unmarked black silk that the boy had worn perhaps 3 times, and he changed into it. He bound his hair into a simple knot at the nape. He put on soft cloth shoes. He looked at himself one last time in the brass mirror. The face that looked back was the beautiful face of the boy everyone called good-for-nothing Han. The expression on the face was not the expression the boy had ever worn. He left the room at the 2nd bell of night and walked, silently, through the family compound toward the West Garden. The rib hurt with every step. He breathed through it. Chapter 2. The West Garden. The West Garden was the Han compound's largest open space. It sat between the family's main residence and the eastern wing where the patriarch's council chambers were located. Stone paths ran in patterns through carefully maintained landscape, small ponds, a wooden tea pavilion in the center, 3 weeping willows along the western wall, and a sand pit at the south end where the junior cultivators practiced their forms in the cool hours. Han Ju was in the pavilion. He was sitting on the central bench, one leg propped on the rail, drinking a cup of warm wine from a clay flask. He was 22, broad-shouldered, with the casual physical confidence of a 4th-rank cultivator who had spent the past 4 years assuming he was the strongest junior of his generation and who had not yet, by the borrowed memories, been corrected on the assumption. His face was handsome but rougher than Han Wei's, a heavier jaw, eyes set deeper, a small old scar above his right eyebrow that he had earned at 16 in a tavern fight he had been bragging about ever since. 3 other young men were with him. Han Bin sat on the pavilion's east bench, eating a fried pastry. Han Mo was leaning against the railing on the west side, looking at the moon over the willows. Han Zhu was crouched by the pond, throwing small pebbles at the koi. All 4 were Han clan cousins. All 4 had been in the courtyard yesterday when Han Zhu broke the body's rib. All 4 were laughing. The laughter was the small private laughter of young men telling each other a joke that had been funny on the first telling and had become, by the third telling, the kind of joke that had no humor left in it, and that was now being told as a piece of group bonding. The joke was Han Wei. Han Zhu, in the moment Lu Yin stepped onto the pavilion's outer path, was telling the others about the way the body had whimpered when the rib had cracked yesterday. He was demonstrating the whimper. The others were laughing. Lu Yin stopped at the edge of the pavilion's lamplight. He had been thinking, on the slow walk through the compound, about the precise operational plan for the evening. He had been refining the plan as he walked. The plan, in its final form, was simple. He was not, at his current capability, which was the capability of an undeveloped reverse core practitioner with a cracked rib, going to be able to fight Han Zhu directly. The fight would last 3 seconds. He would lose all 3. He was, however, going to make Han Zhu lose tonight. He was going to make Han Zhu lose in a manner that would, by tomorrow morning, leave Han Zhu stripped of his 4th-rank status, his place in the clan's junior generation, and his standing in the Han household. The mechanism was the family's own internal politics. The Han clan's junior generation was governed by a particular protocol that, by the borrowed memories, had been instituted by Han Tianlong's father 40 years ago. The protocol was this. A junior cultivator could be challenged to a formal duel by any other junior member of the clan, at any time, in front of 2 witnesses. The challenge party could refuse. Refusal was not a failure. But the challenged party could not, by the protocol, decline a challenge if the challenger was a younger member of the clan and if the challenge was issued in front of at least 2 witnesses. The protocol had been written to ensure that older juniors could not avoid sparring with younger juniors who wanted training opportunities. The protocol had a small loophole. The loophole was that the challenger could specify the form of the duel. The standard form was empty-hand sparring to first blood or yielding. There were other forms. Most were trivial. A few were not. One of the non-trivial forms was something called the cup, a Han clan tradition in which both parties drank a fixed quantity of warm wine and then, after 30 minutes of waiting, attempted to perform a specific sequence of meridian exercises. The party whose chi flow held cleanest through the exercises won. The party whose flow disrupted lost. The losing party was, by tradition, required to apologize for whatever recent slight had triggered the challenge and to surrender 1 rank of standing within the junior generation until the apology had been accepted. The cup had not been used in the Han clan in 30 years. It had been retired because, in modern cultivation, no junior member would accept the cup as a dual form when standard empty-hand sparring was available. The form was, by the junior generation's accumulated opinion, considered an old-fashioned humiliation, a ceremonial relic. It was, however, still part of the protocol. A junior could still issue it. Lu Yin stepped into the pavilion's lamplight. The laughter stopped. Han Zhu looked up. The corner of his mouth lifted in immediate amusement. He set his wine cup down on the bench beside him. He said, in the loud, carrying voice of a young man performing for the other 3, "Good for nothing. You walked all the way here. Brave. I would have thought yesterday's lesson would keep you in your room for a week." Lu Yin did not respond to the line. He walked, slowly, with his hands clasped loosely behind his back, into the center of the pavilion. He stopped 3 paces from Han Zhu's bench. He bowed, a precise short bow, neither too deep nor too shallow, the bow of a junior member of the clan addressing an older one in a formal capacity. He said, in a clear, quiet voice that carried through the pavilion and that did not, in any tone, matched the boy the four young men had been laughing about. Cousin Hanju, I am here to formally challenge you to a duel of the cup, with cousins Han Bin and Han Mo as witnesses. The cause of the challenge is the slight you offered me yesterday in the eastern courtyard, in the form of breaking my rib without provocation. The challenge is issued under the Han Clan Junior Generation Protocol of the 40th year. Do you accept? The pavilion went very still. Han Bin stopped chewing his pastry. Han Mo turned away from the moon and looked at Lu Yin with the slow surprise of a young man who could not, for the first 8 seconds of his observation, parse what he had just heard. Han Zhu, by the pond, dropped a pebble into the water and did not throw another. Han Zhu stared at him. For a count of 5, no one spoke. Then Han Zhu laughed. It was a louder laugh than the previous laughs. It was the laugh of a young man who had just heard, from a person he considered furniture, a sentence so unexpected that the only available response was laughter. He said, when the laugh had finished, "Good for nothing. You are challenging me to a duel." "I am." The cup. The cup. You are challenging the 4th-rank cultivator of the Han Clan Junior Generation to a meridian exercise duel that has not been issued in the clan in 30 years. "I am." Hanju looked at the other 3. He laughed again. He said to Han Bin, "Bin, you are a witness. So is Mo. The fool is invoking the protocol. The protocol requires me to accept or to publicly refuse a formal challenge. A public refusal would, by the protocol, cost me a rank of standing. I cannot refuse. I have to accept." Han Bin said, slowly, "You have to accept. I have to accept. The protocol is the protocol. The protocol does not care that the fool is, well, the fool. The protocol only cares that he is a junior member of the clan, and he has issued a challenge with 2 witnesses." Hanju looked at Lu Yin. The amusement in his face had not faded. The amusement had, in the past minute, deepened into the particular cruel amusement of a young man who had been handed an unexpected opportunity to humiliate his target more thoroughly than he had been able to before. He said, "Good for nothing. I accept. The cup, here now. Bin, fetch the 2nd flask from the kitchen. The good wine. We will, by the protocol, both drink the same quantity. Mo, fetch the meridian exercise sequence card from the Eastern records. The original card from the protocol. Zhu, set the lamps brighter. I want the witnesses to see clearly when the fool fails." The 3 cousins moved. Han Bin went for the wine. Han Mo went for the card. Han Zhu adjusted the pavilion's 3 oil lamps. Lu Yin stood in the center of the pavilion with his hands clasped behind his back. He was, in the small hidden part of his thinking, calculating. The cup duel had 2 phases. The drinking phase, in which both parties consumed the same fixed quantity of warm wine. The waiting phase, 30 minutes during which the wine had time to enter the bloodstream and begin its effect on the meridian's chi flow. The exercise phase, in which both parties performed the specific sequence of meridian exercises from the original card. The drinking phase was straightforward. They would both drink the same wine. The waiting phase was where the cup's actual operational mechanism lived. Most cultivators, when they drank warm wine before performing meridian exercises, experienced a small but measurable disruption of chi flow. The disruption was caused by the alcohol's interaction with the standard meridian channels. The disruption was, for a 4th-rank cultivator like Hanju, manageable. A 4th-rank cultivator had enough chi control to compensate for the alcohol's effect across the 30-minute window. For a junior cultivator with weaker control, the disruption was severe. For an unawakened person, which is what Hanju believed Lu Yin was, the disruption would, by the standard medical understanding, simply produce drunkenness, because the unawakened had no chi to disrupt. This was the point Hanju was laughing about. Hanju was laughing because, in his understanding of the situation, Han Wei was about to drink wine he had no chi to handle, would be drunk by the end of the 30 minutes, and would fail to even attempt the meridian exercises. The duel would end with Han Wei vomiting in the pavilion, and Han Ju declared the winner by default. The humiliation would be public, formal, and recorded in the clan's junior generation register. Han Ju was not aware that Han Wei had a reverse core. The reverse core, by the novel Liu Yin had read in his old life, did not flow qi through the standard meridians. The reverse core stored qi in a dense knot at the cardiac plexus and circulated it through what the novel had called the deep channels, a system that operated on a different axis from the standard meridian system, and that was, by its own internal logic, completely immune to disruption by external substances like alcohol. A reverse core practitioner could drink any quantity of wine and pass any meridian exercise test that the standard system measured, because the standard system was not measuring what the reverse core was doing. The meridian exercise sequence on the cup's original card was, by Han Wei's borrowed academy education, a sequence designed to measure standard meridian qi flow. Liu Yin was going to perform it perfectly. Han Ju, having drunk the same wine, was going to perform it badly. Liu Yin was going to win. The cousins came back. Han Bin set the flask of wine on the bench. Han Mo set the original card on a small lacquered tray. Han Ju finished adjusting the lamps. The pavilion was now lit brightly enough that every motion of either duelist would be visible to the witnesses. Han Ju rose from the bench. He poured 2 cups of wine, the same quantity in each, and handed one to Liu Yin. He said, smiling, "Drink, cousin." Liu Yin took the cup. He drank. The wine was warm and good. It was the family's best, the kind kept for ceremonial occasions and not, by the Han clan's normal protocol, used in junior generation entertainments. Han Ju had ordered the good wine because he was enjoying himself. Han Ju drank his own cup. The two of them set the empty cups down on the bench. Han Ju said, in the loud, carrying voice he had been using all evening, 30 minutes. The witnesses will time it. At the end of the 30 minutes, we perform the sequence. Whoever holds his qi flow cleanest is the winner. The loser apologizes for his recent slight and surrenders 1 rank of junior standing. The Han Clan Junior Generation Register will be updated tomorrow morning. Witnesses agree. Han Bin nodded. Han Mo nodded. Han Ju nodded. The 30 minutes began. Han Ju sat back down on the bench. He poured himself a second cup of wine, outside the duel's formal quantity, which only required the first cup, and drank that too. He was, by the borrowed memories of his standard behavior, the kind of young man who could not resist a second drink when the first had gone down well. He poured a third cup 10 minutes in. Liu Yin watched him drink it without speaking. By the 25th minute, Han Ju was, by any visible measure, somewhat drunk. His cheeks were flushed. His eyes had the slightly unfocused look of a 4th-rank cultivator who was, despite his cultivation, processing alcohol at the human rate. His hands, when he set the third cup down, were not entirely steady. He was laughing more loudly. He was looking at Liu Yin with the casual contempt of a young man who had already mentally written the duel's outcome and was simply waiting for the formal motion to confirm it. The 30th minute came. Han Mo, who had been timing it on a small bronze timepiece, said, "The 30 minutes are complete. The exercise phase begins. The sequence is on the card. Both duelists will perform it in turn. Han Ju is the elder. Han Ju goes first." Han Ju stood up. He stretched. He cracked his neck. He rolled his shoulders. He took the card from Han Mo, glanced at it once. He had performed the standard sequences hundreds of times, and handed it back. He performed the sequence. It took 2 minutes. He performed it competently. He was a 4th-rank cultivator. His basic qi control was strong enough that, even with 3 cups of wine in his system, the sequence held together at perhaps 70% of his normal performance. His qi flow visibly stuttered at 2 of the 7 nodes. The witnesses, by the protocol, were required to note any stuttering. Han Bin noted 2 stutters. Nodes 3 and 6. Han Mo noted 2 stutters. Confirmed. Han Ju completed the sequence and bowed. He sat back down on the bench, smiling, the easy smile of a young man who had not, by his own internal accounting, performed perfectly, but had performed well enough to win against a target who would not perform at all. He poured himself a fourth cup of wine. He drank it while watching Lu Yin. Han Mo handed Lu Yin the card. He said, Han Wei, your turn. The sequence is written. Begin. Lu Yin took the card. He looked at it. The sequence was simple. He had read its description in the novel from his old life. In passing, the novel had used a similar sequence as the demonstration form for its own protagonist's first display of his reverse core capability. Lu Yin had not, when he had read the novel, paid any particular attention. The novel had been pulp. The sequence had been a paragraph. The paragraph was now, by the operation of whatever had brought him into this body, exactly the operational document he needed. He stood in the center of the pavilion. He centered his weight. He took 3 slow breaths. He felt, for the first time in this body, the small dense knot of chi at the bottom of his ribcage, and he allowed it, by the careful instruction of the novel's paragraph from a decade and a half ago, to begin its slow, steady circulation through what the novel had called the deep channels. The deep channels lit up under his skin. They were not visible to the witnesses. The deep channels operated on a different axis from the standard meridians and did not, by their own structure, produce the visible chi glow that the standard meridians produced during heavy exercise. The witnesses saw nothing. What the witnesses saw was Han Wei standing in the center of the pavilion, breathing evenly, performing the 7-node sequence with the precise, smooth control of a cultivator whose chi flow was not, in any measurable way, disrupted by the wine. He performed all 7 nodes cleanly. There were no stutters. He completed the sequence in 1 minute and 40 seconds. He bowed. The pavilion went silent. Hanbin's pastry was on the bench beside him, half-eaten and forgotten. Han Mo was holding his bronze timepiece with both hands in front of him, his eyes wide. Han Zhu was standing by the pond with both fists clenched at his sides. Han Zhu was on the bench, the 4th wine cup still in his hand, staring at Lu Yin with the slow horror of a young man whose understanding of the past 5 years had just been overturned in the span of 1 minute and 40 seconds. Han Zhu said, in a voice that was no longer carrying, "What?" Han Mo, by the protocol, had to record the outcome. He said, slowly, in the formal cadence the protocol required, "The duel is decided." Han Zhu performed the sequence with 2 stutters at nodes 3 and 6. Han Wei performed the sequence cleanly with no stutters. Han Wei is the winner. Han Zhu is, by the protocol, required to apologize for the slight that caused the challenge and to surrender 1 rank of junior standing within the Han clan. The clan's junior generation register will be updated tomorrow morning at the 2nd bell. Witnesses confirm. Han Bin, in a small dazed voice, said, "Confirmed." Han Zhu, by the pond, in a smaller voice still, said, "Confirmed." The 3 pairs of eyes turned to Han Zhu. Han Zhu did not move. He sat on the bench with the wine cup still in his hand, staring at Lu Yin, and his face went through the small, precise sequence of expressions that, by the borrowed memories, Han Zhu had never been seen to wear. Confusion, denial, anger, and then, in the slow, horrible bloom of a young man who had just registered that his understanding of his cousin had been built on a fundamentally wrong piece of information, the first slow lift of fear. Lu Yin looked at him. He stepped forward. He stopped 2 paces from the bench. He waited. Han Zhu, by the protocol, was required to deliver the apology before the witnesses left the pavilion. The apology had a fixed form. Han Zhu had to recite it from memory. Han Zhu had probably not recited it in 5 years. Han Zhu, by the visible state of his composure, was not sure he could recite it tonight. He recited it. It took him 3 attempts. The first 2 attempts faltered after the opening line. The 3rd attempt got through it. He said, in a voice that was almost a whisper, "Cousin Han Wei, I offered you, yesterday, a slight that the protocol of the Han clan has now formally adjudged unjustified. I offer my apology. I surrender one rank of junior standing in the Han clan. I commit to the witnesses and to the clan that I will not offer you any such slight again. The apology landed. The witnesses, by the protocol, were required to formally accept the apology on Liu Yan's behalf as the offended party's representatives. They did. Han Mo stamped the bronze timepiece's small seal on a fresh card to record the duel's outcome for the morning register. The duel was done. The witnesses bowed to both duelists and began packing up the cards, the timepiece, and the lamps. Liu Yan did not bow. He stood 2 paces from Han Ju's bench and looked at his cousin in the lamps. He said, very quietly, in a voice that did not carry past the bench, Han Ju. Cousin Han Wei. The protocol has been satisfied. The clan's register will be updated. Your rank is now 3rd. Mine is still none. The protocol does not award me your rank. The protocol does not give me any rank. The protocol only takes 1 from you. You and I are, by the morning's register, going to be in a different relative position than we were yesterday, but not by very much. Yes, you should know, however, that the duel tonight is the first piece of a longer operation. The longer operation is not on the clan's register. The longer operation is on a list I wrote earlier today on a piece of rice paper. Your name is at the top of the list. The list has 16 names on it. The names are in order. The order is the order I am going to take them in. He paused. He let the words sit. He said, you have, by tonight's duel, demonstrated to the witnesses that you cannot, in fact, defeat me at the cup. You have, by the apology, formally acknowledged that the slight you offered me was unjustified. Both pieces of information will become part of the clan's permanent record. The information will be available to any future clan elder who, at any future point, considers your behavior toward me in the context of any other complaints I may, in the future, file. The information will become, by my careful management of it across the coming months, the operational foundation for your eventual removal from any position of authority within this clan. You will not, Cousin Han Ju, be a 4th-rank cultivator of the Han clan junior generation in 2 years. You will not be in the junior generation at all. You will be, by the careful application of the protocols you and I both grew up under, a minor branch member of the clan with no formal standing, working in some accounts office in the Western District, with no path back to where you stood yesterday morning. I am informing you tonight, in this pavilion, so you may, in the coming months, consider your options. The options include leaving the clan voluntarily before I move you out. If you leave voluntarily, I will not pursue you further. If you stay, I will move you out by the means I have just described, and the moving will take everything you have. Han Ju stared at him. He did not, by every measure of his face, know what to say. Liu Yan turned and walked out of the pavilion. He did not look back. He walked, slowly, across the west garden, through the family compound, back to his own small room in the northern wing. He passed Mei Hua in the corridor outside his door. She was sitting on a low stool, exactly where she had said she would be sitting, with a small piece of needlework in her hands. She looked up. He nodded to her once. She bowed and returned to her needlework. He went into his room and closed the door. He sat on the edge of the bed in the lamp's amber light. He breathed. The rib hurt. The wine was beginning, finally, to produce a small, mild warmth in his cheeks. The reverse core had handled the chi flow disruption, but it could not stop the alcohol from being alcohol, and he had drunk a full cup of strong wine on a cracked rib at the second bell of night. He let the warmth settle. His mouth, in the lamp's light, lifted at the corner. The smile, this time, was wider than it had been in the morning. The first name on the list was crossed off. 15 remained. He had been Han Wei for less than 20 hours. He had a very long evening ahead of him. Chapter 3. The Awakening Test. The cousins did not speak of the duel. By the second bell of the next morning, the clan's junior register had been updated. Han Ju's rank was now 3rd. The change was a single brushstroke on a piece of parchment in the Han clan elders' record office. The brushstroke was the only formal trace of what had happened in the West Garden. The clan's senior elders, who did not concern themselves with the junior generation's small internal frictions, did not read the register. The patriarch did not read the register. None of the 4 great family senior figures across the eastern capital read the register. Only the junior generation read it. By the 3rd bell of morning, every junior cultivator of the Han clan, 53 young men and women between the ages of 14 and 25, knew that Han Ju had lost a duel of the cup to Han Wei. The Han clan junior gossip network ran on the assumption that no junior member could be defeated by an unawakened cousin. The assumption had been violated. The violation produced, in the small confined social structure of the junior generation, the precise quality of confusion a hive produces when a wasp lands on the comb. Liu Yin did not, on the morning after the duel, leave his room. He lay in bed until the 7th bell, eating breakfast Mei Hua brought in on a brass tray, reading from a stack of texts she had, by her own initiative, without being asked, fetched from the family's general library. The texts were the standard works on cultivation theory the Academy used in its first-year courses. He had not, by the borrowed memories, ever opened any of them. The body had not been allowed in the Academy's first-year courses. The body had been placed in a special administrative track for unawakened students of noble families. He read all 3 texts by the 2nd bell of afternoon. The texts were tedious. They were the cultivation world equivalent of high school chemistry. Careful, methodical introductions to a system that had been worked out by other people generations ago and that current cultivators were expected to apply rather than to interrogate. Liu Yin did not interrogate the system. He needed, for his immediate operational purposes, to know what the system claimed, what it measured, what it was blind to, and what its standard graduates believed about themselves. The system claimed 9 ranks of cultivation. The system measured chi capacity and meridian flow. The system was blind to the reverse core, to any non-standard meridian configuration, and to any cultivation method developed outside the Imperial Registry's catalog of 70 approved styles. Standard graduates believed the system was complete. The texts had nothing to say about reverse cores. Liu Yin had not expected them to. He finished the 3rd text, set the stack on the small writing desk, and went to find his father. Han Tianlong was, by Mei Hua's morning briefing, in the Eastern Study. The Eastern Study was the patriarch's private office. It was a place no 4th son had ever, by the borrowed memories, been invited into. The body had stood at the Eastern Study's outer door perhaps 6 times in 10 years and had not, in any of those occasions, been permitted past the threshold. Liu Yin walked to the Eastern Study at the 3rd bell of afternoon. The senior steward, a thin elderly man named Steward Pu who had served Han Tianlong for 40 years and who had, by the borrowed memories, never spoken a single sentence directly to Han Wei, stood at the outer door. He looked up as Liu Yin approached. His face went through the precise 3-stage expression of an old retainer who had registered the boy approaching, had failed to recognize him, and had then identified him by elimination as the only Han boy who matched the build. He bowed, automatically and shallowly, by the protocol for a 4th son of the patriarch. He said, "4th young master, Steward Pu, I would like a brief audience with my father." The steward blinked. He said, slowly, "The patriarch is in the middle of his afternoon correspondence. He is not, by the standard schedule, receiving visitors until the 7th bell. I am not a visitor. I am his 4th son. I would like 5 minutes. The matter is operational. I would not, by my own honest assessment, have come to the door if the matter were not operational. Please convey the request." Steward Pu looked at him. The look took, by Liu Yan's count, for seconds. In those 4 seconds, the old steward's face shifted from the standard protective neutrality he had worn for 40 years into something else. The something else was the look of a man who had, in those 4 seconds, registered that the fourth young master at the door was not the fourth young master the steward had been ignoring for 10 years. The steward bowed. He said, "I will convey the request." He went into the study. He came back in 2 minutes. He said, "The patriarch will see you for 5 minutes. Please go in." Luyan went in. The eastern study was a long, high-ceilinged room with 3 tall, paper-paneled windows on the south wall, a writing desk of polished black wood at the far end, and a single hanging scroll on the east wall. A calligraphic piece reading, "Discipline is the father of strength," in the bold hand of a master Luyan did not, from the borrowed memories, recognize. Han Tianlong sat behind the desk. He was 48. He was a large man, broad in the shoulders, with the heavy physical presence of a senior cultivator of the 7th rank who had been training for 30 years. His hair was black with a single streak of gray at the right temple. His face was the harder, older version of the face Luyan had seen in the mirror that morning. The same bone structure, the same jaw, the same dark slate-colored eyes, sharpened by decades of decisions and weathered by the kind of authority Han Wei had been raised under, and Luyan was, for the first time, meeting in person. Han Tianlong did not look up when Luyan entered. He continued reading the document on his desk. He said, after perhaps 30 seconds, "Sit." There was no chair across the desk. Luyan stood. Han Tianlong finished the document. He set it aside. He looked up. He said, "Wei. 5 minutes. Begin." Luyan looked at his father across the desk in the late afternoon light. He said, "Father, I am requesting a second awakening test." Han Tianlong's expression did not change. He said, after a count, "You took the awakening test 10 years ago." "I did." The result was conclusive. It was conclusive by the test's standard measurement. It was not, by my own assessment of myself in the past 3 days, conclusive in any deeper sense. I have reason to believe my meridians were misread by the standard test. I am requesting that I be permitted to take the test again, at the Imperial Martial Registry's central office, with the senior registrar conducting the measurement personally rather than the junior registrar who conducted the original test. The patriarch looked at him. For perhaps the first time in his life, by the borrowed memories, Han Tianlong actually looked at his fourth son. The look took 15 seconds. He said, slowly, "You have reason to believe." "I do." "Your reason?" "Father, I will be honest with you. The reason is partly an internal sense of my own chi state that I have only registered in the past 3 days, and partly the operational evidence of the cup duel I won against my cousin Han Ju last night. The duel required the performance of a standard meridian exercise sequence under the disruptive influence of warm wine. I performed the sequence cleanly. The result is, by the standard cultivation system's logic, impossible for an unawakened person. Either the system is wrong, or my awakening test was wrong, or I have been awakened for some time without being aware of it. Any of the 3 conclusions justifies retesting. I am asking you to authorize the retest." Han Tianlong looked at him for another long count. He said, "The duel." "Yes." I had not been informed of the duel. It happened last night. The clan's junior register was updated this morning. I did not anticipate the senior elders would learn of it through the standard channels until the next quarterly review. You defeated Han Ju. At the cup, not in open combat. He is 4th rank. I am, by the test standard reading, unawakened. We could not have fought in open combat. The cup was the only dual form available to me under the protocol. I selected it for that reason. You selected the cup deliberately. I did. The patriarch sat back in his chair. He looked at his son with the slow, careful attention of a senior cultivator who had spent 30 years assessing other cultivators by the small operational tells they revealed in conversation, and who had, in the past 2 minutes, registered tells he had not, in 18 years, registered in the body across the desk. He said, slowly, "Wei, stand still for a moment. Do not move. I want to read your chi state directly." Luyan stood still. Han Tianlong raised his right hand. He placed it, palm out, in the air across the desk. He closed his eyes. The Patriarch's Qi, by Lu Yan's read of the warm, steady pressure that now built in the air between them, was the Qi of a 7th-rank senior cultivator who had been refining his control for 3 decades. The pressure was not threatening. The pressure was the precise diagnostic reach of an experienced cultivator examining another cultivator's Qi state at a distance. Han Tianlong's hand stayed in the air for perhaps 20 seconds. The pressure shifted slowly across Lu Yan's standing form, over his head, down his shoulders, along his arms, down his torso, to his legs. The pressure paused at his sternum for longer than at any other location. The pressure withdrew. Han Tianlong opened his eyes. He said, in a voice that was completely flat, "Wei, Father, your standard meridians are blocked. Exactly as the test recorded 10 years ago. There has been no change. I know. Your Qi, however, is not at your standard meridians. Your Qi is at, Wei, your Qi is at a location the standard system does not have a name for. The Qi is dense. The Qi is, by my read, larger than the Qi of any first-rank cultivator I have measured in 20 years. The Qi is, in fact, approximately the size of a 5th-rank cultivator's standard reserves. The location is at the bottom of your sternum, in a knot, in a configuration the standard cultivation manuals do not describe. He looked at his son. He said, "You have a reverse core." Lu Yan went very still. He said, after a count, "You know what that is?" "I know what it is. I have not, in 30 years of cultivation practice, ever met a person who had one. The reverse core is, in the Imperial Martial Registry's classified texts, a non-standard cultivation configuration that has, across the registry's 700 years of record-keeping, appeared in approximately 11 individuals. All 11 were considered, by the registry's senior cultivators, anomalies of the first order. 6 of the 11 became the senior cultivators of their generation. 2 of them became founders of new martial schools. 3 of them, Wei, destabilized the empires they lived in to the point that the Imperial Registry's senior figures had to coordinate to remove them. He paused. He said, "You are the 12th. Lu Yan looked at his father in the late afternoon light. He said, "Father, Wei, the Imperial Martial Registry's classified texts. They are accessible to the Han clan patriarch. They are accessible to the 4 great families' patriarchs. They are not accessible to anyone else. The reverse core's existence has been kept quiet for 700 years because the registry's senior cultivators have, by long policy, decided that the reverse core's potential operational consequences are large enough that public knowledge of the configuration would produce instability across the cultivation community. The configuration is a state secret. I am, by my own choice in this room, in the next 5 minutes, going to either share that secret with you in full, or I am going to perform the action the Imperial Martial Registry's policy nominally requires for the discovery of a reverse core in a junior cultivator under my authority. What is the action? The standard action is to report the discovery to the Imperial Martial Registry's senior office within 7 days, and to surrender the cultivator to the office's custody for evaluation. The evaluation is, by the registry's records, usually fatal. The registry's senior cultivators do not, in general, permit reverse core practitioners to develop independently. The registry's stated reason is the protection of the cultivation community's stability. The actual reason, by the small unofficial knowledge that has accumulated among the 4 great families' patriarchs across centuries, is that reverse core practitioners cannot be controlled by the standard cultivation hierarchy. The registry prefers to remove them. Lu Yan held his father's eyes. He said, "You have not yet made your choice." "I have not." "What are you weighing?" The patriarch looked at him in the late light. He said, slowly, "I am weighing the question of whether the Han clan is better served, across the next 30 years, by a 4th son whom the registry will quietly execute within the year, or by a 4th son whose reverse core I conceal from the registry and who, with my support, develops into the kind of cultivator the registry has been afraid to allow for 700 years. I am weighing. Wei. Also, the smaller question of whether the fourth son in front of me is the kind of son a Han patriarch can trust with that level of concealment. The first question has an obvious answer. The Han clan is better served by the second option. The second question is the one I am, in this hour, less certain about. The second question, yes, the fourth son I have known for 18 years is not the kind of son I would have entrusted with state-secret concealment. The fourth son in front of me, across the past 5 minutes, has not been the fourth son I have known. The change is too sharp. I cannot account for it. I am, in this hour, asking myself whether the fourth son in front of me is the same person as the fourth son I have known. Luyan looked at his father. He had, in the slow walk from his room to the eastern study, been preparing for this conversation. He had been preparing it on the assumption that his father would not, in their first real meeting, ask the question he had just been asked. He had assumed his father would dismiss the duel as luck and the request for retesting as a fourth son's late-blooming desperation. His father had been smarter than he had expected. Han Tianlong was not, by every honest measure of the past 5 minutes, a man who could be operated on by the standard tools. Luyan thought about it for a count of 3. He chose to tell the partial truth. He said, "Father, I will be honest with you, because the alternative is concealment that will not survive your second look. The fourth son you have known has, across the past 3 days, undergone a change. The change is internal. I cannot, by any honest description, characterize the change as a possession or a transformation in the supernatural sense. The change is the activation of a piece of myself that the previous 18 years had been holding closed. The closing was, I believe, the result of the same misdiagnosis that classified my standard meridians as blocked. The activation was triggered, 3 days ago, by the beating Han Ju gave me. The beating cracked my rib. The crack, by some internal mechanism I cannot explain, also cracked the closing. I have, since the crack, been a different person than the boy who walked into the courtyard 3 days ago. I am not, Father, going to claim that the new person is the same boy you have ignored for 10 years. I am going to claim that the new person is, by the same body and the same blood, your son. The son in front of you tonight is the son you would have had 10 years ago if the awakening test had been performed by a senior registrar instead of a junior one. The boy you have ignored was the misdiagnosis. The son in front of you tonight is the correction. It was, in operational terms, the cleanest version of the truth he could deliver without disclosing the transmigration. He had no way of confirming the version's effect on his father. He waited. Han Tianlong sat behind the desk for a long count. He said, finally, Wei, Father, I am going to choose the second option. I am going to conceal your reverse core from the registry. I am going to support your development. I will not, however, support it openly. The Han clan cannot, in the eyes of the registry or the other 3 great families, be seen to know that you have anything other than the standard blocked meridian condition the test diagnosed. The support will be private. The development will be private. You will continue, in public, to be the unawakened fourth son. You will continue to attend the academy. You will continue to live in the northern wing. The cousins who have been treating you as furniture will continue to treat you as furniture, because if they stop, the change will be visible to the other family's agents, who watch every senior household of the Eastern capital for exactly this kind of operational tell. He paused. He said, the duel with Han Ju is, by my read of the situation, already a small operational tell. The tell can be contained because Han Ju and the witnesses have no reason to publicize a duel that ended in Han Ju's humiliation. They will keep it quiet for their own reasons. The clan's junior register will record it without context. The other families will not investigate. The tell will not propagate. But you cannot, going forward, produce any further tells of that visible kind. The development must be entirely private. Are we understood? Understood. One further thing. Yes. He looked at his son across the desk. He said, slowly, Wei, you said your list has 16 names on it. Han Ju informed me, an hour ago, through a junior steward, that you had told him last night that you intended to remove him from the clan within 2 years. I have not, in the past hour, been entirely sure what to make of the information. I am, now, sure what to make of it. The list. You will tell me the names. You will tell me the order. The Han clan's support for your private development will be, among other things, operational support for the actions on the list. The list, however, must, from this evening forward, be coordinated with me directly. You will not, in any future case, move against a clan member or a clan ally without my prior approval. The reason is operational. Some of the names on your list will, by their position in the clan or in the cultivation community, require careful sequencing to remove without producing collateral instability. I have the knowledge required for the sequencing. You do not yet. You will, with my help, develop the knowledge. Until you have developed it, you will operate under my coordination. Are we understood? Lu Yin looked at his father in the late light. He had, in his old life, not had a father he had ever been able to negotiate with directly. His old life father had died of cancer when Lu Yin had been 19 and had been, in the years before, the kind of distant cold figure that the borrowed memories of Han Tianlong had been, with the added cruelty of the kind of long quiet alcoholism that had made the distant cold figure into something even less reachable. The father across this desk was not that figure. The father across this desk was a senior cultivator of the 7th rank, the patriarch of one of the 4 great families, the man who had, across the past 15 minutes, registered his 4th son's hidden inheritance, made the choice to protect it, and offered the operational coordination that would allow the son's revenge list to be executed without destroying the clan in the process. The father across this desk was, in operational terms, the most useful possible ally. Lu Yin said, Understood. The list. I will deliver it to you in writing tomorrow morning, in this study, at the 3rd bell. We will review it together. We will sequence the operations across the coming months. The first 6 names are within the clan. The remaining 10 are external, 3 at the academy, for in the other 3 great families, 3 at the imperial court. I have, by the past 3 days of research, some preliminary read on each. The reads are incomplete. I would welcome your input on each. You will have my input. Father. Wei. Thank you. The patriarch did not, by any visible motion, respond to the thanks. He said go. The 5 minutes are up. Steward Pu will arrange for a private cultivation chamber in the Eastern Wing's basement. The chamber has been in use for 9 years. You will have it from tomorrow morning. The cultivation manuals for the reverse core configuration that the Imperial Registry holds in its classified archives. I have, by my position as a senior patriarch, periodic access. I will obtain a copy of the senior manual for you within the month. Until then you will train by whatever method you have been using. The chamber's existence will not, by Steward Pu's discretion, be visible to any other clan member. We will meet daily, at the 3rd bell of evening, to review your progress. Lu Yin bowed. It was a precise, deep bow, not the bow of the 4th son the patriarch had ignored, but the bow of an operator to his senior partner at the start of a partnership. He left the eastern study. Steward Pu was at the outer door. Steward Pu bowed to him as he passed. The bow was deeper than the bow Steward Pu had given him on the way in. Lu Yin registered the change and walked back to the northern wing with his hands clasped behind his back and his mind already moving through the operational sequencing of the 16 names on the list. By the time he reached his room, he had crossed off the 2nd name in his head. The 2nd name was crossed off because the 2nd name was no longer a target. The 2nd name had been Han Tianlong, father. The 2nd name was now an ally. 14 remained. The 3rd name on the original list was the cousin Han Bin. He sat down at the writing desk and began to draft the next operation. Part 2. The Academy. Chapter 4. Capital Martial Academy. The Capital Martial Academy occupied the western quarter of the eastern capital. The campus covered 9 city blocks. Its outer wall was 20 feet of cut granite, capped with iron railings. Its main gate opened onto a wide stone plaza that bus lines from across the city terminated at. And on any given morning at the 7th bell, the plaza was full of black uniformed students arriving for the day's classes. Liu Yin rode in through the main gate at the 7th bell on a Monday morning 11 days after the conversation in his father's study. He rode in a black sedan with tinted windows that his father's house had assigned to him on the morning after the second awakening test. The test, conducted at the Imperial Martial Registry's central office by a senior registrar named Inspector Wu, had, exactly as Han Tianlong had predicted, confirmed the original diagnosis. Han Wei's standard meridians remained blocked. The senior registrar had then conducted, on Han Tianlong's quiet payment of a substantial sum routed through 3 intermediaries, a falsified secondary report stating that the boy had recently developed a partial late awakening of 1 minor meridian, enough to justify the Han clan permitting him to continue attending the academy and engaging in light physical training, but not enough to qualify him as a registered cultivator. The falsified report was the cover. The cover would allow Liu Yin to slowly, across the coming year, display abilities that the academy and the other families would attribute to the partial late awakening rather than to a reverse core. The car door opened. The driver, a clan retainer named Su, who had not, by the borrowed memories, ever spoken to Han Wei before the past week, and who now treated him with the precise polite respect Steward Pu had begun showing him in the eastern wing, held the door. Liu Yin stepped out onto the plaza. He was wearing the academy's standard black uniform. The body, across the past 11 days of careful nutrition Mei Hua had been managing, and across the 7 hours of daily cultivation in the basement chamber his father had assigned, had filled out by perhaps 4 pounds. The face under the uniform's collar was the same beautiful face from the brass mirror, but the eyes above the cheekbones had acquired a new quality of patient attention that the body's previous tenant had never carried. The plaza was full. 300 students milled around the main gate's check-in stations. Most wore the black uniform of the standard cohorts. A scattering wore the deep red uniform of the senior cohort, the academy's top 30 students, who had access to private training facilities and who were the academy's nominal representatives at inter-academy competitions. A handful wore the gold-piped uniform of the 7th-year graduating cohort, who were preparing for the Imperial Registry's final examination at the end of the spring term. Han Wei's standard cohort was the 3rd-year administrative track. The administrative track was, by the Academy's internal organization, the slow grade for noble family children who had not awakened. The track taught the basic theoretical curriculum without the practical cultivation component. Its graduates were placed in clerical positions across the imperial martial bureaucracy. The track had 23 students in Han Wei's cohort year. None of them were considered, by the rest of the academy, real students. Han Wei's classmates had been treating him as the lowest status member of the lowest status track for 3 years. The lowest status member, because his classmates were also unawakened nobles, but were unawakened nobles whose families had not, by accident of birth, given them faces like the one on Han Wei's body. Their faces were the ordinary faces of the ordinary children of nobles. His face was the face of a young man who, by every visible measure, should have been the senior cohort's golden boy. The contrast was the heart of the bullying. The contrast was the part the boys of the senior cohort, in particular, could not let go of. The senior cohort's golden boy was a young man named Bai Yong. He was 19. He was the only son of the Bai family, which was the 3rd of the 4 great families of the eastern capital, and which had, under his father's leadership, pursued a steady operational rivalry with the Han clan across the past 20 years. Bai Yong had been at the academy since 14. He had advanced to the senior cohort at 16. He had been the cohort's top student for the past 2 years. He was tall, broad-shouldered, sixth-rank cultivator at age 19, and was, by the borrowed memories, the principal architect of the Han Wei mockery that the senior cohort had institutionalized across the past 3 years. Bai Yong's standard joke, repeated at least 3 times a week, had been, "Good face, good body, good family, no qi." The 4 great waste of the eastern capital. Han Wei. The joke had been picked up by the senior cohort, then by the standard cohort, then by the rest of the academy. Within 2 years, good-for-nothing Han had become the boys' only name on campus. The third name on Lu Yan's list, after the sequencing review he had completed with his father across the past 10 days, was no longer Han Bin. The third name was Bai Yong. Bai Yong was at the senior cohort's check-in station this morning. He was standing with 3 friends, Lin Jia, Wu Cheng, and a second Bai cousin named Bai Pei. The 4 of them were laughing. They had been at the academy long enough that the morning routine had become a piece of casual social performance. They were not, on this morning, looking at the main gate. They were not looking at the standard cohort's check-in line. They had no operational reason to. Lu Yan walked through the standard cohort's check-in. The check-in officer, a junior administrator named Master Lu who had been signing Han Wei's morning attendance for 3 years and who had not, by the borrowed memories, ever looked at the boy's face during the signing, looked up this morning as Lu Yan presented his student card. The look took, by the body's small operational tells, for seconds. Master Lu's expression went through the same 3-stage adjustment Steward Poo's face had gone through 11 days ago. He stamped the card. He said, "Young Master Han, welcome back. Your attendance is recorded." Lu Yan took the card. He said, "Thank you, Master Lu. Has the schedule been updated for the new term?" The administrator blinked. He said, "The standard schedule, yes. The administrative track's 3rd-year curriculum begins this morning at the 8th bell. The first session is Comparative Cultivation Theory in Classroom B3. Thank you." He walked into the academy's main quadrangle. The quadrangle was a long, open courtyard that ran between the academy's 2 main academic buildings. The senior cohort's training pavilions were along its eastern side. The standard cohort's classrooms were along its western. The administrative track's small block was at the western end's furthest corner. A deliberate placement, the borrowed memories indicated, that had been arranged 20 years ago by an academy registrar who had decided that the administrative students should be kept visually separated from the actual students. Lu Yan walked across the quadrangle at the unhurried pace he had been practicing in his room. He had been practicing the pace because the pace was, by his old life's experience in private equity boardrooms, the kind of operational tell that registered subliminally with experienced observers. A man who walked slowly in the middle of a hurrying crowd was a man whose presence the crowd would, by some unconscious mechanism, begin to track. The mechanism was not conscious. The mechanism was the human animal's instinct for who in a moving group was operating at a different operational level. He walked slowly. Within 30 paces, he had been noticed. The first to notice was a 3rd-year senior cohort student named Sun Bo, who was crossing the quadrangle from the east side and who registered, in his peripheral vision, a black uniformed student moving at a pace that did not match the morning's general rhythm. Sun Bo turned his head. He saw a tall, slim young man in a standard cohort uniform, walking with his hands clasped behind his back, with a face that, by Sun Bo's accumulated memory of every face on this campus, he could not, at first, place. Sun Bo slowed his own walk. He looked again. The face matched the face of good-for-nothing Han. The expression on the face did not match the expression good-for-nothing Han had worn for 3 years. Sun Bo stopped walking entirely. He turned to a 4th-year senior cohort student walking beside him, a young woman named Wen Yan, and said something Lu Yan could not hear at the distance, but whose content Lu Yan inferred from the way Wen Yan's eyes lifted and then locked on him across 40 yards of stone. Lu Yan kept walking. He passed within 20 feet of the senior cohort's check-in station. Bai Yong did not, in the first instant, notice him. Bai Yong was telling his friends a joke about a tavern incident from the previous weekend. The joke was just landing. The friends were laughing. Lin Jie noticed Lu Yin first. Lin Jie's laughter stopped mid-breath. His eyes tracked the figure walking past. He nudged Bai Yong with his elbow. Bai Yong turned. Bai Yong's eyes landed on Lu Yin in the same moment Lu Yin was passing the check-in station's outer corner. Bai Yong's expression went through the same 3 stages everyone else's had been going through. The third stage settled into the standard expression Bai Yong had worn around Han Wei for 3 years. The casual, amused contempt of a senior cohort student looking at an administrative track unawakened. The contempt, however, was layered on top of something new. The new something was a flicker of operational uncertainty, lasting perhaps half a second, that registered on Bai Yong's face before the contempt covered it. The flicker was the response of a 6th-rank cultivator who had, for the first time in 3 years, looked at Han Wei and registered that the boy across the quadrangle was carrying himself in a way the boy had never carried himself before. Bai Yong recovered fast. He raised his voice. He carried the joke he had been about to tell his friends. He said, in the loud, carrying voice of a senior cohort student performing for the quadrangle, "Look, the 4 Great Waste graces us with his presence. Walk slower, Han. The world is watching. Maybe by the 3rd bell of afternoon, you will have walked all the way to your classroom." Lin Jie, Wu Cheng, and Bai Pei laughed. A few of the nearby senior cohort students laughed. A scattering of the standard cohort students who had been within earshot pretended to laugh. Lu Yin kept walking. He did not turn. He did not slow. He did not lift his hands from behind his back or alter his stride in any visible measure. He walked past the senior cohort station, across the rest of the quadrangle, and through the administrative track's small archway at the western end without acknowledging Bai Yong's existence. The non-acknowledgement was, by his old life experience, the most operationally effective response available. Bullies of Bai Yong's type ran on the social fuel of their target's reaction. The target's lack of reaction starved the fuel. Bai Yong, who had been receiving Han Wei's flinches and shoulder-rounding and quick averted eyes for 3 years, had just been handed, by the boy he had been bullying, a full 30-second silence that had reframed the audience's understanding of the exchange. Lu Yin registered the audience's reframing as he passed under the administrative archway. He registered it because the standard cohort students near the archway, who had been watching the exchange with the slight reflexive embarrassment people watching bullying tended to wear, were now watching him with a different expression. The expression was the expression of an audience that had just been handed an unexpected social variable and was, in real time, recalculating who in the encounter had actually been the higher status party. Bai Yong, behind him, was laughing too loudly. The laughter was, by Lu Yan's read of it across his shoulders, the laughter of a bully who had felt the audience's reframing and was, by the volume of his laugh, attempting to reassert the original frame. The reassertion was not working. Lu Yan walked into the administrative block. He arrived at classroom B, 3 at the 7th bell and 48 minutes. The classroom was small, 20 desks in 4 rows. A long blackboard at the front. 3 of the desks were already occupied by his administrative cohort classmates, who looked up when he came in. The looking up produced the same 3-stage facial adjustment he had now seen perhaps 30 times since the morning of the duel. He took his usual desk at the back of the room. He set his book bag on the floor. He folded his hands on the desk in front of him and waited for the lesson to begin. His classmates kept looking at him. He did not look back. By the end of the first session, he had identified, by the careful study of the room he had been performing during the lesson, 3 classmates whose attention might, with the right approach over the coming weeks, become operational assets. By the end of the second session, he had identified 2 more. By the lunch hour at the 5th bell, he had a working list of 5 potential allies in his own cohort, and a clean operational red on which of the cohort's 23 students were not, by their personal preferences, worth approaching. The bullies in the senior cohort were the immediate operational target. His own cohort was the longer-term resource. He ate lunch alone, by his standard habit, in the small administrative track's lunchroom at the western end of the academy's cafeteria building. He did not, today, sit in the corner where Han Wei had always sat. He sat at the long central table, where the cohort's larger groups had always eaten, and where his own previous attempts at sitting had been met with chairs being slid away to leave him a small, isolating gap. Today, no one slid a chair away. 3 of the 5 classmates he had identified during the morning sessions sat down at the table with him across the next 10 minutes. The first to sit, a thin, pale boy named Chao Mu, who had been in his cohort for 3 years and who had, by the borrowed memories, been the only classmate to ever speak to Han Wei with anything other than indifference, set his lunch tray down across from Lu Yin, opened his bottled water, took a drink, and said, in a quiet voice meant only for the table, "Han, something happened to you." Lu Yin looked at him across the table. He said, "Yes. Something good. Yes. You do not want to discuss it?" "Not yet. In time." Chao Mu nodded. He ate. After a count, he said, "I am going to sit with you at lunch, starting from this week, every day, if you want me to." Lu Yin looked at him. He said, "Sit with me." "I will." The 2 other classmates joined the table across the next few minutes. Neither said anything about the change in Han Wei. They simply, by the small unspoken protocol of administrative track students who had been at the academy together for 3 years, decided to be on the same side of whatever was happening. Lu Yin registered them. They would, across the coming year, become, by the patient, careful work he was about to begin investing in each of them, the foundation of his academy network. The bullies in the senior cohort would, in the same year, become the operational casualties of that network. He finished his lunch at the 6th bell and walked back to the afternoon session. He passed the senior cohort's lunch table on the way. Baiyong was at it. Baiyong saw him pass. Baiyong did not, this time, say anything. The silence was the second small operational tell of the day. Lu Yin registered it and walked on. Chapter 5. Lin Shui. He saw her on his 4th day at the academy. She was standing at the edge of the sparring grounds at the eastern end of the campus, watching a senior cohort match between 2 third-year students whose names Lu Yin did not yet know. Her uniform was the deep red of the senior cohort, but with a small silver pin at the collar that the borrowed memories identified as the mark of the academy's most senior individual student, a designation called the Star of the Year that was awarded each spring to the single highest-ranking student of the senior cohort. She had been the Star of the Year for the past 2 years. Her name was Lin Shui. She was 20. She was the second daughter of the Lin family, which was the 4th of the 4 great families. She was, by every measure the borrowed memories had access to, the most advanced individual cultivator of her generation at the academy. A 7th-rank cultivator at 20, on track to reach the 8th before the end of the spring term, with a personal cultivation method that the academy's senior instructors had been quietly comparing to the methods of the great masters of 3 generations back. She was, by every visible measure, the academy's golden student. She was also, by the borrowed memories, the only senior cohort student who had never, in 3 years, joined Baiyong's mockery of Han Wei. She had not defended him either. She had simply, by long preference, not noticed him. Lu Yin was at the sparring ground's edge that afternoon because his administrative track had finished its day's sessions early and he had decided to walk the campus. The walk had been operational. He had been mapping the campus's physical layout against the borrowed memories, but it had also been, in a smaller, honest part of himself, a piece of fresh air time he had not allowed himself in 3 days. He stopped at the sparring ground's outer railing. He watched the third-year match. The 2 students were both 5th-rank cultivators. The match was a standard empty-hand sparring round, to first blood or yielding. The match was, by Lu Yan's developing read of cultivation combat, a fairly competent display of standard academy technique, with neither student showing any particular operational edge. The match ended at perhaps the 7th minute, on a clean strike to the shoulder that produced first blood. The crowd around the railing, perhaps 30 students, clapped politely. Lu Yan turned to leave. His turn brought his line of sight directly across Lin Shui. She was already looking at him. She had been looking at him, by the small operational tells of her body, for perhaps the entire length of the match. She had not been watching the match. She had been watching him. He stopped. He met her eyes across the railings 20 feet. Her eyes were the dark color of a winter river. Her face under the silver pin had the long, narrow lines of a cultivator who had spent her adolescence in private training rather than in the social rounds the other great families' daughters had spent their time on. She was not, by the standard measures of the academy's beauty, the most beautiful young woman on campus. There were perhaps 5 who were more conventionally pretty, but she was, by a different measure that Lu Yan registered in the precise, quiet attention of her face, the most operationally compelling. She held the look across the 20 feet for a count of perhaps 5 seconds. Then she walked toward him. She crossed the distance with the unhurried pace of a senior cohort student who had no operational reason to hurry. She stopped 2 paces from the railing. She said, in a low, even voice that did not lift toward the end of the sentence, Han Wei. Starlin. She studied him in the late afternoon light. She said, after a count, "You do not bow. The Academy's protocol requires me to bow to senior cohort students who hold formal titles. The bow is required only when the senior student addresses me with an instructional intent. You have addressed me with my name, in a tone that does not carry instructional intent. The protocol, therefore, does not require the bow. I am, however, willing to bow if you would prefer the formality." She did not change her expression. She said, "The protocol does not require the bow. You are correct. I am noting, however, that no unawakened administrative track student has ever, in my 4 years at this academy, correctly cited the protocol's instructional intent clause to me. The clause is in the protocol's footnote section. The footnote is in the 3rd edition of the handbook. The 3rd edition was published 2 years ago and is not, by the Academy's standard distribution, given to administrative track students. I read it last week. Where did you obtain a copy?" "My father's library." She held his eyes. She said, "Han Wei, the campus is talking about you. I have heard. You walked past Baiyang Station on Monday morning without acknowledging his line." "I did. The senior cohort has been discussing the exchange for 3 days. The discussion's consensus is that you are either having a small mental breakdown that will resolve within the month, or that something has changed about you in a way that none of us has been able to identify. I am, Han Wei, informing you of the discussion because I have, in the past 3 days, watched you across the quadrangle 3 times. The discussion's first hypothesis is wrong. The second hypothesis is, by my own read of you in the past 5 minutes, correct. I am here to ask you what has changed." He looked at her in the late light. He said, "Starlin. Han Wei, you do not have any operational reason to ask me that question. The change in me, if you have identified it, is not, by my own honest assessment, of any direct relevance to the Lin family or to your own position. The asking is, by every read I can apply, personal rather than operational. The asking is personal." "Why?" She looked at him in the late light. She said, very quietly, "Because I have spent 3 years on this campus watching Baiyang's senior cohort mock you, and I have not, in those 3 years, intervened on your behalf. I have not intervened because the intervention would have, by the protocols of the 4 great families' interfamily relations, produced consequences for my own family that my father was not prepared to absorb. I have spent 3 years registering my own non-intervention as a piece of operational cowardice that I have not, in those 3 years, been able to set down. On Monday morning, I watched you walk past Baiyang Station without acknowledging him. The walk was, Han Wei, by every measure of my own internal accounting, the operational response I had wanted to see for 3 years and had not, in 3 years, expected to see from you. The walk has, in the past 3 days, become the only piece of news on this campus I have wanted to follow up on. I am following up on it now. The follow-up is personal because, across 3 years, I have, in my own private accounting, been on your side. He looked at her. He had, in the slow walk through the campus this afternoon, been preparing for a number of possible operational encounters. He had not been preparing for this one. He said, slowly, Starlin, Han Wei, you have been on my side for 3 years. I have. Without intervening. Without intervening. The non-intervention has been the operational cost of being on your side from a position my family required me to hold. The cost has been mine. I have not, until this afternoon, found a way to address it that did not cost the family more than my father would accept. I am, in this afternoon, finding one. The way is the one I am proposing now. The proposal is, Han Wei, that you and I begin meeting, weekly, at this hour, at the sparring grounds Eastern Bench. The meetings will, in their public framing, be a senior cohort student's voluntary instructional tutoring of an unawakened administrative track student in cultivation theory. The framing is plausible because the Academy's senior cohort has a small formal program by which senior students can volunteer for such tutoring. The framing will, by the program's existence, not produce any consequences for my family. The framing will, in operational reality, allow us to meet in public without the meetings producing operational complications. The meetings themselves will be, by my own preference, about whatever the two of us, in conversation, decide they should be about. Will you accept the proposal? He looked at her. He said, you have not, in 3 years, met me in person before this afternoon. You are proposing a weekly meeting after a 5-minute conversation. I am. You are an unusual senior cohort student. I have been told that before. By whom? By my father. Approximately 400 times. Across the past 12 years. He laughed. It was a short, quiet laugh. The first laugh he had produced in this body since the borrowed memories had registered Han Wei's last laugh as having occurred at the age of 7, 2 years before the failed awakening test. He said, I accept the proposal. This time next week. The Eastern Bench. The sparring grounds will be empty by the 5th bell of afternoon on a Thursday. The first meeting will be then. Agreed. She bowed. A precise short bow that was not the bow of a senior cohort student to a junior, but the bow of one operator to another at the start of a partnership. She turned and walked back across the sparring grounds toward the senior cohort's pavilions. Luyan watched her go. He walked back to the family compound with his hands clasped behind his back and registered, in the quiet hour of the ride home in the family's black sedan, that the Academy had, in the space of 4 days, given him exactly the 2 operational openings he had been hoping for. The senior cohort's mockery had become a reputational liability for Bai Yong rather than for him. And a senior cohort student of the Academy's highest standing had, on her own initiative, offered him a partnership that, if managed across the coming year, would become a structural piece of the larger operation he had been planning. He went to bed at the 2nd bell of night. The next morning, he met his father in the Eastern study at the 3rd bell, briefed him on the Academy Week's developments, and reviewed the operational sequencing of names 3 through 6 on the list. Han Tianlong listened without interrupting. When Lu Yin finished, the patriarch said, Star Lin. Of the Lin family. Yes. The Lin family's patriarch is a man I have been quietly looking for an operational alignment with for 6 years. The two of us have not been able to find one because our family's formal positions in the Eastern capital have been in apparent opposition. The apparent opposition has been a piece of the Eastern capital's standard political theater that neither of us has been willing to break first. Your meeting with the daughter is, by every read of the situation, the operational opening I have been waiting for. You would like me to develop the meetings. I would like you to develop them across the coming year. I would like, by the end of the year, the two of you to be operating in a coordination that the two patriarchs can formalize. I would like the formalization to result in, within 5 years, the Lin and Han clans being the two of the 4 great families that the other two cannot, on any operational question, outmaneuver. And Star Lin herself. His father looked at him across the desk. He said, Wei, the Star Lin you are meeting next Thursday is, by every read of her my intelligence has produced across the past 3 years, the operator who will inherit the Lin family when her father steps back. Her father is 56. He is approximately a decade from retirement. She will be patriarch at 30. She will then be, with you as the Han clan's senior operator at the same age, the partner whose cooperation will shape the Eastern capital's politics for the next 40 years. The personal dimension of your relationship with her across the coming year is, by my honest assessment, your own to define. I will not interfere in it. I would, however, prefer that the personal dimension develop in a direction compatible with the operational dimension I have just described. The compatibility does not require any particular form. It requires only that the two dimensions, however they develop, not be in conflict. Lu Yin looked at his father. He said, Understood. Good. The patriarch returned to the morning's correspondence. Lu Yin went down to the basement cultivation chamber and worked through the next chapter of the reverse course senior manual his father had, by the means his father had not disclosed, obtained 3 days ago from the Imperial Registry's classified archive. By the end of the day's training, the body's chi reserve had grown by approximately 12%. By the end of the week, it had grown by another 15%. By the end of the month, the body's reverse core was, by the manual's measurement, at the equivalent of the 2nd standard rank. By the end of the spring term, the reverse core was at the 4th. By the end of the spring term, the 3rd name on the operational list had been removed. Chapter 6. Baiyong. The removal of Baiyong did not happen in the spring term. The spring term was the preparation. The actual removal occurred in the autumn, 6 months after Lu Yan's first walk through the academy gate, by means his father had spent the preceding months helping him assemble. The means were 3. The first was operational. Baiyong, in his 4th year at the academy, had been preparing for the Imperial Registry's open tournament at the end of the autumn term. The tournament was the Empire's senior inter-academy competition. Its winners were placed directly into the Imperial Registry's elite cultivator corps. Baiyong had been the Academy's projected senior representative at the tournament for the past 2 years. His participation had been the centerpiece of his family's plan for his entry into the Imperial Registry's senior ranks. The participation required Baiyong to pass, in the autumn's intra-academy preliminary rounds, 3 qualifying matches against senior cohort opponents. Lu Yin, with his father's quiet support, had spent the summer cultivating the operational cooperation of 2 of those 3 opponents. The cooperation was not a corruption. The 2 opponents, Sun Bo and Wen Yin, the senior cohort students who had been the first to notice Lu Yin on his Monday morning arrival, had, across the summer, by Lin Shui's patient introduction and Lu Yan's careful cultivation of their respective grievances against Baiyong, become quiet allies of Lu Yan's operation. The grievances were genuine. Sun Bo's younger brother had been beaten at a junior tournament the previous year by Baiyong's hired second. Wen Yan's family had lost a substantial commercial contract to the Bai family 3 years ago in a maneuver Wen Yan's father had, to the day, never forgiven. Across the summer, the 2 of them had, without Baiyong's knowledge, quietly trained against precise simulations of Baiyong's standard combat patterns under Lin Shui's discreet coordination. In the autumn preliminaries, Sun Bo defeated Baiyong in the first qualifying match. Wen Yin defeated him in the second. Baiyong, eliminated from the preliminaries by 2 opponents he had been expected to defeat handily, did not qualify for the tournament. His family's plan for his entry into the Imperial Registry's elite corps was, by the preliminary results, terminated. The second means was social. Across the same summer, Lin Shui had, by her own initiative, on operational grounds Lu Yin had not asked her to act on, but which she had decided served their developing partnership's interests, quietly circulated through the senior cohort's gossip network a small precise piece of information about Bai Yong's tavern habits. The information was that Bai Yong had, on 3 separate occasions across the past year, paid to have particular conversations with junior cohort women that the women had not, after the conversations, been entirely comfortable about. The information was true. The information had been gathered by Lin Shui's family intelligence office across the past year for unrelated purposes. The information had been, by the Lin family's own protocols, sealed. Lin Shui had unsealed it. The information circulation through the senior cohort produced, across the autumn term, a slow but irreversible shift in the senior cohort's social treatment of Bai Yong. The young women of the cohort stopped speaking to him. Their fathers' households began declining the Bai family's standard invitations. By the middle of the autumn term, Bai Yong had no public social allies left in his own cohort. The third means was familial. The Bai family, registering across the autumn that their son's tournament path had been terminated and his social position had collapsed, conducted an internal review of his recent conduct. The review, by Han Tianlong's careful arrangement with one of the Bai family's senior elders who owed him a 30-year-old operational favor, was conducted by an elder who had, for years, privately considered Bai Yong an unsuitable heir for the family's main line. The elder's review concluded that Bai Yong should be removed from the main line and placed in a junior branch operation in the western prefectures. The Bai family's patriarch, Bai Yong's father, accepted the recommendation by the standard protocol of Bai family internal politics because to reject it would have required him to publicly justify his son's recent failures in a manner the family could not, by its own reputation, afford. Bai Yong was removed from the main line in the 3rd week of the autumn term. He was reassigned to a Bai family junior branch operation in the western prefectures. His student status at the capital martial academy was withdrawn. His departure from the academy was effected by the academy's standard administrative protocol on the morning of the 1st day of the winter term. He did not, on the morning of his departure, encounter Lu Yin. He did, however, encounter Lin Shui. The encounter took place at the academy's main gate at the 7th bell of the morning. Bai Yong was loading a small set of personal effects into his family's car. Lin Shui was walking toward the senior cohort's pavilion for her first session of the winter term. Their paths crossed by the central plaza's fountain. Lin Shui stopped. She said, in the quiet, level voice she had been using for the past 6 months on operational matters. Bai Yong. Lin Shui. You are leaving. I am. You may not know this. I am informing you for your own operational understanding going forward. The information has been part of your situation for the past 6 months. I have not, in those 6 months, shared it with you. I am sharing it now because the operational consequences of the information are, by your departure, complete. The information is this. The reason your tournament preliminaries went the way they did, the reason the cohort's social network turned against you, and the reason your family's review concluded what it concluded, was not, Bai Yong, a series of unrelated misfortunes. The reason was a coordinated operation conducted across the past 6 months by a particular partnership I have been part of. The partnership's senior operator is the young man you have spent the past 3 years calling good-for-nothing Han. I am informing you so you may carry the information with you into your new posting. I would, by my honest preference, like you to remember, for the rest of your life, that the boy you mocked for 3 years removed you from your family's main line in 6 months. Bai Yong stared at her. The staring took, by Lin Shui's later report to Lu Yin, perhaps 11 seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and dry. He said, "You are lying. I am not. The good-for-nothing has not awakened. He is in the administrative track. He is, Lin Shui. He cannot have run that kind of operation. He can. He has. He is the operator I have just described. I am informing you because the informing is part of the operation's intended close. The operation requires you to know, before you leave, who removed you. The removing is, by his preference, a piece of operational work the operator wanted you to carry forward as the small piece of compensation for the 3 years of public mockery you offered him on this campus. She paused. She said, Han Wei, for the record, did not ask me to tell you this. He left the operations close to my discretion. I am telling you because, across 3 years, I owed Han Wei the public stand I never took. The telling is the stand. Take it forward. She bowed, a precise short bow, neither too deep nor too shallow, and walked past him toward the senior cohort's pavilion without looking back. Bai Yong stood by the fountain for perhaps a full minute. Then he got into his family's car and was driven out of the academy gate. He never returned. Lu Yan, at the time, was in his administrative tracks classroom B3, taking notes on the morning's session on imperial trade law. He learned about the encounter at the fountain that evening from Lin Shui at the eastern bench of the sparring grounds, where they had been meeting weekly across the past 9 months. He listened to her report without interrupting. When she finished, he sat for a long count. He said, "You told him." "I did. I had not been planning to tell him." "I know. You told him anyway." "I did. The telling was, by my own assessment, the right operational close." Bai Yong would have spent the rest of his life in the western prefectures, looking for the cause of his removal. He would have, by the standard pattern of disgraced noble heirs, eventually constructed a narrative that placed his removal on his family's elders, or on the registry, or on the heavens. The narrative would have given him a small consolation that he had been the victim of forces larger than him. The narrative would have, in time, allowed him to recover some piece of his self-regard. I did not want him to have the narrative. I wanted him to know, every morning for the rest of his life, that the boy he mocked for 3 years removed him in 6 months. The knowing, Han Wei, is the operation's actual close. The removal alone is incomplete without it. He looked at her in the late afternoon light at the eastern bench. He said, "Lin Shui, Han Wei, you are an unusual partner. I have been told that before. By you. Approximately 15 times. Across the past 9 months. The partnership continues. The personal dimension of the partnership." She looked at him in the late light. She said, "Has been developing across the past 9 months in the direction you and I have both, by our preferences, allowed it to develop. The direction has not, Han Wei, been a direction either of us has, in our weekly conversations, formally named. I have, in the past 9 months, been waiting for you to name it. I am, in this hour, going to ask you to name it. The asking is for my own operational understanding going forward. I would prefer to know, by tonight, what we are." He looked at her in the late light. He said, "Lin Shui, I have, in the past 9 months, registered the personal dimension as developing. I have not, in those months, named it because the naming requires me to disclose, before the naming, a piece of myself that I have not yet disclosed to you. The piece is operationally relevant to the personal dimension. I am, in this hour, at this bench, going to disclose it. The disclosure will give you the information you will need to decide whether the naming you are asking for is a naming you would still want after hearing it." She looked at him. She said, "Go on." He told her. He told her about the body's previous tenet. He told her about the reverse core. He told her about the cosmic origin of his own consciousness, the truck in the rain, the folder of references, the green light. He told her about the list of 16 names. He told her about his father's knowledge and the falsified awakening report. He told her, by the end of the disclosure, almost everything that the only other person who knew any portion of it, Mei Hua, the servant girl, who knew only that the change had happened but not the why, would have needed to know to operate alongside him going forward. He told her in 22 minutes. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she sat at the bench in the late afternoon light for a long count. She said, finally, Han Wei. Lin Shui. The disclosure does not change my answer to the question I asked you. You are sure? I am sure. The disclosure changes the operational scope of what I am agreeing to. It does not change the agreement. I am, Han Wei, going to ask you the question I asked you, in slightly different form. The form is this. The personal dimension of the partnership, going forward, takes whatever shape we, between us, agree to give it. I am proposing the shape of long-term partner. The proposal is not exclusive. I have, by my own family's intelligence on you, already inferred that you have, in the past 6 months, developed a similar quiet shape with the household servant Mei Hua. I am aware of that shape. I am not requesting that you set it aside. I am proposing my own partnership alongside it. Will you accept the proposal? He looked at her in the late afternoon light at the eastern bench. He had not, in the past 9 months, formally registered to himself that the quiet evening hours he had been spending with Mei Hua across the same period had developed into the shape Lin Shui had just described. The shape had been there. He had not named it. Mei Hua had not asked him to. Mei Hua had been, in the operational structure of his household, the partner whose attachment to him was a piece of the structure itself, and the partnership had developed in the slow, quiet rhythm of a young man and a young woman who lived in the same house and trusted each other and had, across 9 months, found each other's company useful in ways neither of them had needed to articulate. Lin Shui's intelligence office had identified the shape. Lin Shui was, by her offer tonight, making operational room for it. He said, Lin Shui. Han Wei. I accept the proposal. Good. She did not move on the bench. She did, however, lift her hand from her lap and rest it, very lightly, on top of his hand on the bench between them. The hand stayed there for a long count. She said, after the count, we should walk back. The sparring grounds will be closed at the 7th bell. He stood up. He gave her his other hand. She rose. They walked, together, across the campus in the cooling autumn evening, toward the main gate. She did not let go of his hand. He did not let go of hers. Part 3. The Northern Rift. Chapter 7. The Hunt. The first time Lu Yin killed a monster, he was 19 years old by the body's count. It was the late autumn of his 4th year at the academy. The body had filled out across the past year of cultivation and proper food. 6 feet tall, lean and hard, with the controlled physical presence of a cultivator who had advanced quietly to the 6th standard rank by his reverse core's continued growth. The face above the academy's black uniform was the same beautiful face from the brass mirror, but the eyes now had the cold, patient attention of a young man who had already, in his short visible career, taken 6 of the original 16 names off his list and was on schedule to clear the rest within the year. His father had brought him on the hunt personally. The hunt was at the Northern Rift, 300 miles north of the eastern capital. The rift was the second largest of the Empire's 9 active monster gates, a permanent tear in the world's outer membrane that had opened 81 years ago in the middle of what had then been a forested mountain pass, and that had, since the opening, produced, by the Imperial Registry's standard count, approximately 40,000 monsters of varying ranks. The rift was held back by a permanent cultivator garrison of 600 senior martial artists drawn from the 4 great families, 6 mid-tier sects, and the Imperial Registry's elite corps. The garrison's standing orders were to engage and destroy any monster that emerged from the rift within 30 miles of the perimeter wall. The autumn hunt was a yearly Han clan rotation through the garrison's command roster. This year, by Han Tianlong's quiet rearrangement of the rotation, Lu Yin was riding north with his father's personal detachment. The detachment included Han Tianlong, for senior Han cultivators, 6 junior cultivators of the clan's middle generation, and Lu Yin. The official cover for Lu Yan's presence was that the patriarch had decided his 4th son's partial late awakening had reached a point where the boy would benefit from observing a senior hunt from the safety of the rear command tent. The actual purpose was that Lu Yin needed, before the year ended, his first confirmed monster kill on the Imperial Registry's roll. The kill would be the formal evidence that supported his father's planned announcement, in the coming spring, of Liu Yan's promotion from the Academy's administrative track to the senior cohort. The promotion would be the public turning point. The hunt would be its operational predicate. They arrived at the Rift's main garrison compound at midnight on the fourth day of riding. The compound sat on a high ridge above the Rift's lower edge, a broad flat plateau that ran for 3 miles along the perimeter wall and that held the garrison's barracks, command tents, supply depots, and the central war room from which the day's engagements were coordinated. Han Tianlong was received by the garrison's senior commander, an old cultivator named General Yi Han, whose 2-year posting at the Rift was halfway through and who had, by the Patriarch's later briefing, been an old academy friend of Han Tianlong's during their senior cohort years 30 years ago. The senior commander spent 20 minutes with the Patriarch in the war room. When he came out, he stopped in front of Liu Yan, who had been waiting in the war room's outer corridor with the rest of the Patriarch's detachment. He looked at Liu Yan for a long count. He said, "Han Wei, General Yi, your father tells me you are here to observe. That is the official purpose. The unofficial purpose." Liu Yan looked at the old commander. He said, quietly, "The unofficial purpose is to take my first confirmed kill." The commander's expression did not change. He said, after a count, "Your father has explained the situation. I have agreed. I will assign you to a junior squad tomorrow morning. The squad's standing patrol covers the southeastern quadrant of the perimeter, which is, by this season's monster emergence pattern, the quadrant most likely to produce a low-rank target appropriate for a junior cultivator's first kill. The squad's senior member will be informed that you are to be given the first engagement opportunity. You will conduct the kill under his supervision. After the kill, the squad will return to the compound and you will report to me directly for the formal registration." "Understood. Understood. One further matter." "Yes." The old commander studied him. He said, slowly, "Your father did not tell me how strong you actually are. He only told me you have, in the past year, advanced significantly. I have, in my own 30 years of reading cultivators, registered young men whose visible posture matches their actual capability and young men whose posture does not match. You are the second kind. I am not going to ask you, in this corridor, what your actual capability is. I am going to ask, instead, that the squad I am assigning you tomorrow be permitted to operate at the assumption that you are the capability your father's official report describes. Do not, on tomorrow's hunt, demonstrate capability beyond that report. The garrison's command chain does not need to know the difference. I will need to know the difference, eventually, but not tomorrow. Will you operate within that constraint?" Liu Yan met the old man's eyes. He said, "I will." "Good." The commander bowed. He went back into the war room. Liu Yan walked with his father's detachment to the Patriarch's assigned quarters at the eastern end of the compound. The Patriarch did not speak to him on the walk. The Patriarch had been giving Liu Yan operational space across the past year. Fewer interventions, more autonomy, the gradual shift in their working relationship from senior coordinator to peer partner that Han Tianlong had begun to phase in once his fourth son's capability had clearly outstripped the early predictions. At the quarters door, the Patriarch said, "Sleep, Wei. Tomorrow's hunt begins at the third bell." "Father." "Yes." "The kill tomorrow." "Yes." "I would like, by my own preference, the squad assignment to be one in which the senior member is not Han Bin." His father studied him. Han Bin had been the third name on the original list, before the sequencing reshuffled the order. Han Bin had, across the past year, been moved aside in the clan's junior generation register by a series of quiet operations Liu Yan had conducted with his father's coordination, and was now serving a junior staff rotation at the Northern Rift garrison as part of his slow demotion from the main line. Han Bin had been at the Rift for the past 4 months. By the garrison's standard squad assignments, he was, on tomorrow's patrol, the senior member of one of the 4 available junior squads. Han Tianlong said, "Why not Han Bin? I would prefer to remove him from the junior generation by means I have full operational control of. If he is the senior member of the squad I conduct my first kill with, his report to General Yi will become part of the kill's permanent record. The report will give him a formal piece of standing in relation to me that I would prefer he not acquire. I am, Father, asking you to arrange for a different senior member." His father nodded. He said, "I will speak to General Yi in the morning. The senior member will be a junior cultivator from the Imperial Registry's Elite Corps rotation, not from any of the 4 families. The neutral attribution will, in addition, serve the public reporting better." "Thank you, Father." Sleep. Lu Yin slept. The 3rd bell of morning came. He went down to the garrison's southeast assembly yard at the half-third, was issued the standard junior cultivator's combat kit, leather coat, short blade at the hip, a small folded talisman packet in the inner pocket for emergency chi restoration, and met his assigned squad at the assembly station. The squad was 4 cultivators. The senior member was the one General Yi had arranged at his father's request. A thin, pale young man named Wei Bo of the Imperial Registry's Elite Corps, 5th rank, 23 years old. With the precise neutral attention of a registry officer who had been told the morning's patrol included a Han Clan Jr. on observational duty and who had no particular operational opinion on the assignment beyond the standard professional one. The other 2 squad members were both 4th-rank junior cultivators of mid-tier sects. Weibo briefed the squad on the morning's patrol route. The route ran the southeastern perimeter wall for 9 miles, conducted in the standard 4-cultivator wedge formation, with engagement protocols on any monster emergence within 300 yards of the wall. The squad mounted up on the garrison's standard patrol horses. They rode out at the 4th bell. The rift's perimeter wall was a 30-foot-high stone barrier, built in a continuous arc along the southern face of the mountain into which the rift had opened. The wall's eastern face, where the squad now rode, looked out across a wide rocky plain that fell away toward the lowland forests below. The plain was the standard monster emergence zone. Monsters that came out of the rift's lower mouth and were not destroyed by the upper garrison's first engagement protocols tended to descend through the plain in their search for living prey. The Southeastern Patrol's job was to engage any survivor. For the first 2 hours of the patrol, the plain was quiet. The squad rode at the slow, steady pace of a routine patrol. Wei Bo, at the wedge's point, kept up a low conversation with Lu Yin about the garrison's standard operational practices. Wei Bo had been at the garrison for the past 3 years. He was the kind of mid-rank registry officer who had been quietly preparing for a senior posting and who, by Lu Yan's read of him across the first hour, was, beneath the registry's standard professional manner, a competent operator with an unusually clean operational mind. Lu Yin registered him as a long-term contact worth cultivating. At the 3rd hour, the squad reached the perimeter's outer marker, where the patrol's pattern reversed. It was at the marker that the monster emerged. It came up out of a stand of rocks 200 yards to the southeast. It was, by Wei Bo's quick identification from the squad saddle, a gray claw, a low-rank monster of the 2nd-tier classification, 4-legged, perhaps the size of a large wolf, with the gray-black hide and curved black claws. The type was named 4. Gray claws were the most common emergence from the Northern Rift. They were dangerous to ordinary humans and a manageable challenge for cultivators of the 2nd rank or higher. Wei Bo turned to Lu Yin. He said, "Han Wei, this is the engagement opportunity. The protocol for your first kill is straightforward. The squad will hold position. You will dismount and engage the target alone. The squad will only intervene if your engagement fails. The target is, by its class, within your reported capability. Are you ready?" Lu Yin dismounted. He drew the short blade at his hip. He said, "I am ready." He walked, slowly, across the rocky ground toward the stand of rocks where the gray claw had emerged. The gray claw came at him at perhaps 30 yards. It moved fast. Gray claws were ambush predators in the wild. They covered open ground in long bounds, with the precise spring-loaded motion of a predator that had been built for short-distance closing speed. The 30 yards collapsed in under 3 seconds. Luyan let it come. He stood in the middle of the open ground, with the blade in his right hand and his left at his side, and he watched the gray claw close the distance. He did not move until the gray claw was within one stride. Then he moved. His movement was the precise application of a reverse core combat form he had been drilling in the basement chamber for the past 9 months. The form was called, in the manual's classification, Wolf Returns to Denver. The form's principle was simple. The practitioner remained still until the target's commitment was full. The practitioner then stepped, in a single quarter rotation of the body, off the target's strike line, and brought the practitioner's own blade up into the target's underbelly at the precise angle the target's own forward momentum would carry it onto. The gray claw's strike committed. Luyan stepped. The blade went in under the gray claw's left foreleg, up into the chest cavity, and through the heart in a single motion that the gray claw's own forward speed carried to completion. The blade exited the gray claw's back between the shoulders. The gray claw was dead before it finished its strike. Its body carried forward another 6 feet on momentum, then collapsed onto the rocks with the dull, heavy sound of a 150-pound predator hitting stone. Luyan stood in the open ground with the blade in his hand, and the gray claw's blood across the side of his coat, and the cold morning wind moving past his face. The squad, behind him on the horses, did not move for a count of 5. Then Wei Bo, in a voice that was completely neutral, said, "Kill confirmed." Han Wei returned to formation. Luyan wiped the blade on a clean strip of cloth he had brought for the purpose, sheathed it, and walked back to the squad. He mounted. The squad returned to the garrison compound at the end of the patrol's standard return route. At the compound, Luyan reported to General Yi personally, as instructed. The old commander listened to Wei Bo's brief report of the engagement, signed the kill's formal registration, and looked at Luyan across his desk for a long count. He said, "1 kill. 1 kill, sir." The engagement, by Wei Bo's report, took approximately 2 seconds. Approximately. The form you used. Wei Bo described it as unfamiliar. I have been training privately. The form is one I worked out from theoretical reading. I had not, before today, applied it in combat. The commander looked at him. He said, slowly, "Your father told me that your actual capability would not match your reported capability. He did not tell me by how much. I am, Han Wei, not going to press the question. I will note, however, that the squad's combined report will not, by my redaction, include the timing or the form. The report will state that you engaged a low-rank gray claw and completed the kill within the squad's observational protocol. That is the official record. The unofficial reality I will keep to myself." "Thank you, sir. One further thing." "Yes." The old man studied him. He said, "Your father is a friend of mine of 30 years. He has, in the past 5 years, been quietly preparing the Han clan for a major transition. I have not asked him what the transition involves. I will not ask you. I will say only that, if the transition includes you in the role I am beginning to suspect it includes you in, the Han clan is, by my honest assessment, going to be in the strongest operational position any of the 4 great families has held in 70 years. I am informing you because I would like, when the transition becomes formal, to be the kind of long-term operational contact the Han clan can rely on at the Northern Rift garrison. I am willing to be that contact. I am informing you now, so the offer is on the table." Luyan looked at the old commander across the desk. He said, "General Yi, Han Wei, the offer is accepted. I will, when the transition becomes formal, ensure that the Han clan's standing relationship with the Northern Rift garrison runs through your command for the duration of your remaining service. The relationship will be, by my own preference, a personal one. I would like, in the year ahead, to spend additional rotations here under your command. The rotations will give us the opportunity to build the operational understanding the long-term contact requires. The rotations will be welcome. Thank you, sir. The old man bowed. Lu Yin left the war room. He went back to his father's quarters and reported the kill, the conversation with General Yi, and his own read of Wei Bo's potential as a long-term contact within the Imperial Registry's elite corps. Han Tianlong listened. When Lu Yin finished, the patriarch said, "Your first kill." "Yes." "How did it feel?" Lu Yin looked at his father across the quarter's small lamp. He said, slowly, "It felt like work." "Work?" "Yes. The kind of work that I have been training for. The kind of work I am operationally suited for. I did not, in the moment of the strike, feel any of the things I had read other cultivators feel on their first kill. I did not feel pride. I did not feel disgust. I did not feel any version of the moral hesitation the Academy's standard instructional texts describe as the natural response of a novice cultivator to the taking of a first life. I felt, instead, the clean professional satisfaction of a task performed correctly. The Gray Claw was not, Father, a person. The Gray Claw was a monster that had emerged from a rift to consume living humans. The killing of it was the kind of work that the entire cultivation establishment of this empire has been built around. I am, in this hour, registering that the work suits me. I am, Father, also registering that the suiting is the same suiting that the previous 16-name list suited me for. The continuum is, by my own honest assessment, a continuum that the cultivation establishment has not fully acknowledged. The killing of monsters and the removal of human enemies are, in operational terms, the same kind of work. The difference is the target. I am suited for the work, regardless of the target. His father looked at him in the lamp's light. He did not, for a long count, speak. He said, finally, "Wei, Father, the continuum you have just described is the continuum the Imperial Registry's senior administrators have been quietly aware of for 700 years. The awareness is part of why the Registry has, across that period, removed the 11 previous reverse core practitioners. The Registry has, by its long policy, decided that the kind of operator the continuum produces is operationally dangerous to the cultivation hierarchy's internal stability. The decision is, by my read of the Registry's records, not entirely wrong. The previous 3 reverse core practitioners that the Registry removed had, before their removal, taken between 20 and 100 human lives by means the Registry could not formally justify. The cultivation hierarchy does not, in general, permit individual operators that operational latitude. You are warning me. I am warning you. I am, in the same warning, telling you that I am, by my own decision across the past year, going to permit you the latitude regardless. The latitude is the cost of the operational position the Han clan will hold across your generation. I am willing to absorb the cost. I am informing you of the cost so you may, in your own operational planning, account for it. Lu Yin looked at his father. He said, "Father, Wei, the cost. The Han clan will, by my work across the coming years, become operationally exposed in ways the other 3 great families' clans are not. The exposure will be the structural consequence of the work being mine rather than theirs. I am, in the past year, registering the exposure. I am also registering, by the same year, that the exposure can be managed. The management requires the Han clan's senior leadership to maintain operational discipline across the period in which the other family's senior leaderships register the Han clan as the rising power. The management's primary risk is, Father, your own succession. I am 20 by the body's count. You are 49. The standard cultivation life expectancy at the 7th rank is approximately 120 years. You have, by every measure of your current health and cultivation state, perhaps 70 years before your succession becomes operationally active. The 70 years is, by my honest planning, the window in which the work I am going to do can be conducted under your patriarchal cover. The cover is the cost's primary load-bearing element. His father held his eyes. He said, 70 years. Approximately. You have been planning 70 years out. Yes, I have been planning, since the conversation in the Eastern study a year ago, on the assumption that the operational arc you and I are conducting together will span the rest of your active life. The arc's terminus will be, by my projection, the year of your formal succession to me. After that year, I will conduct the operations under my own patriarchal cover. Before that year, I will conduct them under yours. The 70-year window is the operational predicate. His father sat in the lamp's light for a long count. He said, finally, Wei, Father, I have been planning across the same period. My own plan extends to approximately the same horizon. I had not, until this conversation, registered that you had been planning at the same scale. I am, in this hour, going to formally adjust my operational read of you. You are not a fourth son whose late-blooming reverse core has, by my support, become the family's hidden strength. You are an operator whose internal scale matches my own. I have, in 40 years of working alongside other senior cultivators, encountered perhaps 3 operators of that scale. None of them have been Han clan members. None of them have been my own family. The fact that you are, Wei, both is the most operationally useful single fact of my life since I became patriarch. He stood up. He came around the small lamp table and stopped in front of Lu Yan. He said, Stand up. Lu Yan stood. His father took him by the shoulders. It was the first physical contact the patriarch had initiated with the body across the 18 years of the body's accumulated memory. He said, in a voice that was completely level, the Han clan has, for 900 years, been one of the 4 great families of the Eastern capital. The clan has, in those 900 years, produced perhaps a dozen patriarchs whose operational scale was the scale the clan needed to advance from the lower edge of the 4 into the upper. None of those patriarchs have been my own ancestors in the direct line. My direct line has, for 9 generations, been a careful holding pattern. I have spent 30 years of my own patriarchal tenure preparing the clan for the next operator of that scale. I had been planning, until last year, to begin the search for the operator among my brother's children. I had not, Wei, expected the operator to be my own 4th son. I am, in this hour, formally telling you that the search is concluded. The clan's next patriarch is you. You will inherit, by my formal designation, in 70 years. The 70-year window is yours to use. Use it well. Lu Yan looked at his father in the lamp. He had not, at any point in his old life or in this one, expected to be in this conversation. He said, slowly, Father, Wei, I will use it well. His father held his shoulders for another count. He let go. He sat back down at the lamp. He said, Go and rest. The squad's standard rotation tomorrow morning is at the 4th bell. You are not on it. You will have the day to recover from today's engagement. We will discuss the next operations in the evening, in this quarters. The next operations include, by my read of your list, the 4 remaining names from the original 16, plus the additional 6 names you have added across the past year. 10 total. The 10 are, by my honest projection, completable by the end of next year if we operate at the current tempo. Understood. Sleep. Lu Yan went back to his assigned room at the eastern end of the patriarch's quarters. He did not sleep immediately. He sat on the small bed in the lamp's amber light for a long count, with the gray claw's blood still on the side of his coat, and registered that the year since the morning he had woken in this body had, by every measure he could apply to it, produced an operational position that the previous tenant of the body had not, in his short 18 years, been able to imagine. The operational position was the position of the Han clan's designated patriarchal heir. He had been despised by everyone in this household a year ago. He was, in this hour, the household's quiet senior operator and his father's formal successor. He let himself, for the second time in this body since the morning he had woken in it, smile in the small private way that had no audience. Then he washed the gray claw's blood off his coat, lay down on the bed, and slept. Chapter 8. The Black Wolf. He returned to the Northern Rift 4 more times across the next year. By the end of the 4th visit, the squad's combined kill ledger had recorded him for 31 confirmed monster engagements at progressively higher ranks. The 31st was a Black Wolf, a 4th-tier monster, the apex of the Northern Rift's standard emergence catalog, which had killed 7 cultivators across the previous decade before the squad encountered it on a routine perimeter sweep at the end of the spring term. The squad's 2 mid-tier sect cultivators went down in the first 30 seconds of the engagement. Wei Bo, by then a regular member of Liu Yan's assigned rotation and the only senior member of the squad still standing after the Black Wolf's opening rush, was holding the creature off with a defensive spear form that, by his own honest read across the next 6 seconds, was not going to hold. Liu Yan moved at the 7th second. The form he used was not one the Quiet Wolf's Walk manual had explicitly described. It was a form he had developed across the past 6 months, in the basement chamber under his father's coordination, by extrapolating from 3 of the manual's senior chapters into a synthesis the manual's 800-year-old author had not anticipated. The form's working name in his private notes was Black Mountain Falls. The form was the application of the reverse core's deep channel chi as a directed compression wave, focused along the blade's edge, that, by the form's principle, overrode the target's standard cultivation defenses by operating on an axis the target's defenses were not built to register. The Black Wolf was a 4th-tier monster. Its hide was, by the Imperial Registry's standard manuals, resistant to any sub-8th rank cultivator's standard blade techniques. Black Mountain Falls was not a standard technique. The blade went in at the Black Wolf's throat and out at the back of its neck in a single motion. The Black Wolf's head and body separated. The body, by its own 300 pounds of forward momentum, carried 4 feet past Wei Bo's spear position before it collapsed onto the rocks. Wei Bo stood with his spear still raised in defensive guard. He did not lower the spear for perhaps a full count of 10. When he finally lowered it, he looked at Liu Yan across the dead Black Wolf and the 2 dead squad members and the cold spring wind moving across the southeastern perimeter. He said, in a voice that was almost entirely level, Han Wei, Wei Bo, the form you just used, is not standard. The form, by my read of it in the half-second it took, was operating on a cultivation axis I have not seen described in any of the Imperial Registry's senior manuals. I have spent 15 years training at this garrison. I have not seen that form before. Liu Yan looked at the senior officer in the spring light. He said, Wei Bo, Han Wei, you saved my life by the 2nd engagement of my first patrol last autumn. You have, across the past year of our rotations, been the senior member I have most trusted in this garrison. I am, in this hour, going to disclose to you a piece of operational information that I have not yet shared with anyone in the Imperial Registry. The disclosure is the foundation of the operational relationship I would like to develop with you going forward. Will you accept the disclosure on the condition that the information does not, by any means, propagate beyond your own ear? Wei Bo lowered the spear's tip to the ground. He said, I accept. Liu Yan told him. He told him about the reverse core. He told him about his father's knowledge of it. He told him about the registry's 700-year policy of removing such practitioners. He told him about the falsified awakening report. He told him about the operational position the Han clan was preparing to take across the next several decades. He did not tell him about the truck or the rain. The disclosure took 15 minutes. Wei Bo listened without interrupting. When Liu Yan finished, Wei Bo stood in the spring light for a long count. He said, Han Wei, Wei Bo, the Imperial Registry's senior policy on reverse core practitioners. The policy is, by my own classified clearance, which is one rank below the policy's authority level, known to me in general terms. I have, in 15 years at this garrison, been one of perhaps 6 officers of my rank in the Empire who who would have recognized what you just did on a battlefield. The recognition required me to choose, in the past minute, between reporting the recognition to the registry and not reporting it. I have, in the past minute, chosen not to report. I am informing you of the choice so you may understand that the choice has been made operationally, not by my own surprise. The choice is final. I am, Han Wei, formally aligning with your operation. The alignment is, by my own preference, structured around the long-term cooperation between the Imperial Registry's mid-rank operations and the Han clan that your father is, by my own reading of the past year's operational patterns, preparing across the next decade. I am asking you to formalize the alignment through me. Lu Yin looked at the senior officer. He said, slowly, Weibo, the alignment is welcome. The formalization will happen at the Han clan's main compound, at a date my father and I will arrange within the month. You will be invited to the compound for a private meeting with my father. The meeting will produce the formal arrangement that will govern your operation alongside the Han clan for the next 40 years. I am informing you of the arrangement in advance so you may, in the intervening weeks, prepare for the conversation. Will you accept the invitation? I will. One further question, Weibo. Yes. You are a senior officer of the Imperial Registry's Elite Corps. The Corps' standard career trajectory is a senior posting at the Registry's central office at age 40. You are 25. You have 15 years of standard advancement ahead of you. In a Corps whose senior administrators have, by my own intelligence, registered you as a candidate for the Registry's senior leadership. The alignment with the Han clan, in operational terms, requires you to give up that trajectory in exchange for an operational position whose long-term scope I will not be able to fully describe to you tonight. Why are you accepting? Weibo looked at him in the spring light. He said, after a count, Han Wei, the Registry's standard career trajectory is, by my own honest assessment, the trajectory of a man who has decided to spend his life inside a system whose senior administrators are, across the past century, the kind of men I would prefer not to spend my life serving under. The system is, by my own read, not the system the Empire deserves. The system you and your father are building is, by my read of the past year, going to become the system that replaces the Registry's senior administrators within my own active service. I would prefer to be inside the new system at its founding rather than inside the old system at its decline. The alignment with the Han clan, in those terms, is, Han Wei, the most operationally honest choice my career has offered me. I am taking it. Lu Yin looked at him. He said, Weibo, Han Wei, welcome aboard. The senior officer bowed. He turned to the dead Black Wolf and the two dead squad members. He said, in the standard professional voice of the garrison's mid-rank officers, we will need to report the engagement. The two dead squad members will require formal recovery. The Black Wolf's hide will be, by my report, credited to your kill ledger. The report's official version will state that you and I jointly conducted the engagement with the Black Wolf, with you delivering the killing strike from a flanking position after my own spear engagement opened the target's defensive posture. The official version will not, by my own discretion, include the form description. Acceptable. They conducted the recovery and the report by the standard garrison protocols. The Black Wolf's hide was credited to Lu Yan's ledger at the Registry's senior office by the end of the month. The credit made him, at the body's count of 21, the youngest cultivator in the Imperial Registry's records to take a 4th-tier monster kill. His father announced his promotion to the Academy's senior cohort on the morning after the Registry's ledger update. The promotion was, in formal terms, the public turning point Lu Yin had been working toward across the past 2 years. The promotion's reception across the Eastern Capital's social network was, by the careful coordination Han Tianlong and Lu Yin had spent 6 months arranging, exactly the reception they had been planning for. Most of the city's senior cultivation families registered Lu Yin as a remarkable late-blooming cultivator whose partial awakening had, through unusual circumstance, produced an unusually rapid development. A few of the city's most operationally sophisticated families registered him as something else. The Bai family registered him as an enemy. The Lin family registered him as their daughter's known partner. The fourth family, the Wu family, which had been the least operationally engaged of the four great families across the past decade, registered him as an unknown variable worth monitoring. None of the four families' senior leaderships, including the Bai families, registered him as a reverse core practitioner. The cover held. The work continued. Chapter 9. Han Yu. The next name on the list was Han Yu. Han Yu was Liu Yan's eldest half-brother, the patriarch's first son by the first wife. He was, at the time of Liu Yan's promotion to the senior cohort, 31 years old, a sixth-rank cultivator, and the formal heir to the Han clan's main line until Liu Yan's promotion had, by Han Tianlong's quiet decision, placed his designated succession in operational doubt. Han Yu was not yet aware of the change. The change had been, by Han Tianlong's preference, kept private. The patriarch had decided, across the past year of operational coordination with Liu Yan, that the announcement of the succession change would be made only at the point where Liu Yan's public capability had reached a level that the announcement would not, by its own surprise, destabilize the clan. The point was approximately 3 years away. In those 3 years, Han Yu was, by Liu Yan's operational list, to be moved into a position from which he could not, when the succession announcement came, organize any resistance. The moving was not, in Liu Yan's operational planning, a matter of removing Han Yu from the clan. Han Yu was, by every read Liu Yan had developed across the past 2 years of patient observation, a competent senior cultivator whose operational scope was the standard mid-tier scope of a 6th-rank Han clan officer. He was not, by any honest assessment, operating at the scale that the succession Han Tianlong had announced privately would require. He was not a threat in any active sense. He was, however, a threat by inheritance. If he remained in his current position as the formal heir until the announcement, he would, at the moment of the announcement, have the operational standing within the clan's middle generation to coordinate a faction. The faction would not, by Liu Yan's projection, win against the patriarch's formal designation. The faction would, however, produce 6 months of internal friction that the clan's larger operational arc could not afford. The friction needed to be prevented. Prevention required Han Yu to be moved, before the announcement, into a position from which he could not coordinate. The position, by Liu Yan's analysis, was the senior command of the Han clan's southern garrison, a permanent posting at the Southern Rift, 800 miles from the eastern capital, that the clan's senior leadership had been quietly trying to fill for the past 2 years. The southern garrison's posting was prestigious. It was also operationally isolated. The garrison's senior commander did not, by the posting's standard rotation, return to the capital except for the yearly senior council meetings. The posting was a 6-year tour. By the end of the tour, the heir announcement would have been made and consolidated. Han Yu, returning at the end, would find the clan's succession formally settled in Liu Yan's favor and would have no operational base from which to challenge it. The challenge would be the work of arranging the posting in a manner Han Yu would accept. Han Yu had, by the borrowed memories and the past 2 years of Liu Yan's quiet observation, 2 operational features that the offer would need to engage. The first was that he had been quietly bored at the eastern capital for the past 3 years. The second was that he had, since his 16th year, held a quiet ambition to become the youngest Han clan member to command a Rift garrison, an ambition his uncle had achieved at 34 and which Han Yu had been hoping to match at 32. The Southern Rift posting would let him match it. The match would be, by Han Yu's own read of his career, the most operationally satisfying advancement available to him in the next 5 years. Liu Yan, with his father's coordination, arranged the offer across the spring. The offer was formally extended in the early summer. At a Han clan senior council meeting, that Han Tianlong convened for the standard quarterly business. The offer was presented as an unrelated agenda item. The senior council had been informed that the southern garrison's previous commander was retiring and that the position required a senior Han clan officer of 6th rank or higher. The council had 4 candidates. 3 of them were members of the middle generation. The 4th was Han Yu. The patriarch, presiding the meeting, presented the candidates without recommendation. The council debated for 90 minutes. By the end of the debate, through a sequence of small precise interventions Liu Yin had quietly coordinated across the past 3 months with 2 of the senior council members whose votes were the swing. The council selected Han Yu by a margin of 7 votes to 4. Han Yu accepted the posting with the precise mixture of formal humility and operational satisfaction that the borrowed memories had predicted he would display. He departed the eastern capital for the southern rift in the fall. His departure was registered by the 4 great families' standard intelligence offices as the routine senior posting of the Han clan's first son to a prestigious garrison command. No family's intelligence registered the departure as the operational consequence of an internal succession arrangement. The arrangement had been clean. The 5th name on the list was crossed off. Chapter 10. Meihua. The autumn after Han Yu's departure. On a quiet evening in the early 9th month, Meihua came into Liu Yan's room at the eastern wing of the Han compound at the 2nd bell of night and sat down on the edge of his bed without being invited. She was 19 now. She had been in the household for 7 years. She had been, by Liu Yan's quiet arrangement across the past 2 years, formally promoted within the household's senior staff from the position of personal servant to the position of household manager. A formal title that gave her authority over the household's 23 other servants and that drew, in salary, the kind of independent income that allowed her to maintain her own quiet financial autonomy within the compound. She had not, in the past 2 years, ever sat on the edge of his bed without invitation. Liu Yan, who had been reading at the writing desk in the late lamp's light, set the book down. He said, "Meihua, young master, what is the matter?" She looked at him across the small room. She said, in the precise low voice she had developed across the past 3 years for operational conversations, "Young master, I am going to tell you something. The telling is not, by my own preference, a request. The telling is an information delivery. The information is operationally relevant to your own planning. You will, after the telling, make whatever decision the information requires. The decision will be, young master, your own." He looked at her in the lamp's light. He said, slowly, "Go on." She said, "I am pregnant." The room went very still. He looked at her across the lamp. He had not, across the past 2 years, formally registered that the quiet evening hours he had been spending with her since the first month at the Han compound had developed into the kind of consistent partnership that would, by its own internal arithmetic, produce this kind of information at some point. The development had been there. The arithmetic had been there. He had not, by his own preference, named it. He named it now. He said, "Meihua, young master, how long have you known?" 4 weeks. You have been holding it for 4 weeks. I have. The holding was, by my own decision, the operational discipline of a servant who needed to be sure before bringing the information to the young master. The sureness has, by tonight's medical confirmation, been established. The information is now operationally actionable. He looked at her across the lamp. He said, "Meihua, sit closer." She came closer. She sat on the edge of the bed near his desk. She did not look at him directly. He said, "The decision the information requires. I am, in this hour, going to tell you what the decision is. The decision is mine to make because the operational context of the pregnancy is mine to take responsibility for. The decision is that you will, from tonight forward, be formally registered as my recognized partner within the Han clan's household registry. The registration will give you the standing of a senior partner of the clan's heir, which will be, by my father's already prepared paperwork that I have not, until tonight, had the operational occasion to file the formal recognition the situation requires. The child will be registered as my acknowledged firstborn, with all the inheritance rights the clan's standard protocols allow. The registration will be filed tomorrow morning. The household will be informed within the week. The 4 great families' standard intelligence offices will register the news within the month. The registration is Mei Hua, not, in any of its dimensions, contingent on your own preferences. The registration is the operational consequence of the past 2 years. I am informing you now so you may understand the decision before tomorrow's paperwork is filed. She looked up at him. She said, in a voice that was almost a whisper, "Young master." Mei Hua, the registration will, by the household's standard protocols, make me a senior partner of the clan's heir. The registration will produce, by its operational consequences across the 4 great families, the kind of political attention that a servant girl from the Eastern slave market is not, by any standard read of the situation, prepared to absorb. I am, young master, informing you that the registration, in operational terms, is a significant escalation of my visible position. I had been planning on bringing you this information to ask for a quieter solution. The quieter solution would have been an unregistered concubine position, with the child raised in a junior branch of the household, with my own continued service in the household management role. The quieter solution would have been operationally containable. The quieter solution is not the solution I am offering. I am aware. I am, in this hour, asking you to confirm that the solution you are offering is the solution you have considered fully. The solution will require me to take on a public role I have not, in 7 years at this household, been prepared for. The solution will require the Han Clan Senior Council to formally accept a servant's elevation to senior partner status. The solution will produce, by every read I can apply, operational resistance from at least 3 of the clan's middle generation members and from the Bai family's senior intelligence office. The resistance can be managed, but the management will cost the Han clan some operational capital. I am asking, young master, whether you have weighed the cost and decided it is acceptable. He looked at her in the lamp. He said, Mei Hua, young master, the cost is, by my honest read, approximately 1/4 of the Han clan's available operational capital for the next 12 months. The clan can absorb the cost. The Bai family's resistance can be managed by the same operational structure I used to remove Bai Yong. The middle generation's resistance can be managed by my father's standing internal authority. The resistance will be, by my projection, settled within 6 months. The settling will produce, in addition, the formal precedent that the Han clan senior partnerships are not, by their own standards, restricted to the 4 great families' bloodlines. The precedent will be useful for the long arc of the clan's operational evolution across the next several decades. The precedent is, by my honest accounting, worth the cost. He paused. He said, the precedent, however, is not the reason I am making the decision. The reason is that I have, in the past 2 years, registered you as the partner whose attachment to me is the structural foundation of my own internal stability across the household. I am, Mei Hua, in this hour, formally telling you that I do not want the quieter solution. I want the registration. The registration is the form the recognition has been waiting 2 years to take. I am taking it tonight. Are you, by your own preferences, willing to accept it? She looked at him across the lamp. She did not speak for a long count. She said, finally, young master. Mei Hua, I accept. She came around the desk to him. She knelt at his side and put her head against his knee. He put his hand on the back of her head. He held her there for a long count in the lamp's amber light. He said, after the count, one further thing, Mei Hua. She looked up at him. He said, do not call me young master in this room again. Her face, in the lamp's light, lifted at the corner in the small, careful, private smile she had been giving him in their evening hours across the past 2 years, and that no one else in the Han compound had ever, in 7 years, seen on her face. She said, Han Wei, Mei Hua, we should sleep. We should. The lamp burned low. She rose. She blew out the lamp. The room went dark. Chapter 11. The Lin Family Wedding. The registration of Mei Hua as senior partner of the Han clan's heir was filed at the city's central registry office at the 7th bell of the next morning. The registration's operational consequences played out across the next 6 months exactly as Liu Yin had projected to her in his room. The Bai family's intelligence office attempted 3 small operational maneuvers against the registration standing. All 3 were anticipated by the Han clan's intelligence office, which by then was being run, in operational practice if not in formal title, by Lin Shui's coordination with Liu Yan's father, and all 3 were neutralized within the standard response window. The Han clan's middle generation produced 2 formal objections, both of which were heard by the senior council and dismissed. The Eastern Capital's broader social network registered the development with the precise mixture of curiosity and quiet recalibration that significant noble household changes usually produced. By the end of the 6 months, the registration had settled into the household's standard operational reality, and the 4 great families' intelligence offices had moved on to other matters. Lin Shui, on the evening the 6 months closed, at the eastern bench of the Academy's sparring grounds, where she and Liu Yin had continued their weekly meetings across the years even as both of them had advanced into senior positions in their respective families, said, in the precise low voice she had been using for operational conversations across their entire partnership. Han Wei. Lin Shui. The registration has settled. It has. My father has, in the past month, registered the settling as the operational signal he had been waiting for. He has been preparing, in the same 6 months, a formal proposal to your father. The proposal is the formal alliance between the Lin and Han clans that he and your father have been quietly preparing across the past 3 years. The proposal will be formally presented at the senior council meeting next month. The proposal will, by the alliance's standard form, include, among its operational provisions, a formal marriage between a senior member of each clan as the structural anchor. She paused. She said, the senior member from the Lin side will be me. The senior member from the Han side will be you. The formal marriage will be the public formalization of the partnership we have been operating in for the past 3 years. She looked at him in the late afternoon light. She said, my father has asked me to formally propose the arrangement to you tonight. I am, by his instruction and my own preference, proposing it now. The proposal is, Han Wei, the formalization. Will you accept? He looked at her in the late light. He said, Lin Shui. Han Wei, I accept the proposal. She bowed, the precise short bow she had been giving him for 3 years. She said, the formal marriage will be conducted at the Han clan's main compound at the end of the next quarter. The ceremony will be private. The 4 great families' senior leaderships will attend. The Imperial Registry's senior office will send a formal delegation. The marriage's operational consequences will become public across the standard channels within the following month. Understood. One further thing. Yes. She looked at him in the late light. She said, Mei Hua. Yes. I have, in the past 6 months, met her 3 times by my own initiative. Twice at the Han compound's senior staff gatherings, and once at a charity event Madame Han Tianlong sponsored at the Eastern Temple. I have, across those meetings, formed an operational read of her. The read is, Han Wei, that she is the kind of partner whose presence in the household structure I am about to enter is, by my own preference, an asset I am pleased to be operating alongside. I am not, Han Wei, requesting any operational adjustment to her position. I am informing you that my own entry into the household, when it occurs, will be conducted in the manner of a senior partner who recognizes Mei Hua as her co-equal in the household's internal arrangements. The configuration will be, by my own preference, a partnership of three rather than a hierarchy. He looked at her in the late afternoon light. He said, Lin Shui. Han Wei. Thank you. You are welcome. She did not move on the bench. She did, in the gathering dusk, rest her hand on his on the bench between them in the same precise, quiet manner she had begun on the evening of the bench 3 years ago. They sat together in the dusk until the academy's 7th bell rang. The formal marriage took place at the end of the next quarter, exactly as Lin Shui had described. The wedding's reception line, held at the Han compound's main pavilion, with the 4 great families' senior leaderships in formal attendance, and the Imperial Registry's senior delegation occupying the eastern row, was the largest single gathering of senior Eastern capital figures the compound had hosted in 15 years. Mei Hua stood at Lu Yan's left shoulder during the reception, in the formal robe of a senior household partner of the clan's heir, with their son, born 4 months earlier, named Han Liang at Mei Hua's own preference for a name from her own family's village, in a small carved cradle behind her. Lin Shui stood at Lu Yan's right shoulder during the reception, in the formal robe of a Lin family senior daughter married into the Han clan's main line, with the ceremonial jade pendant her own father had placed around her neck at the morning's family side right. The 3 of them were photographed at the reception's central moment by the Imperial Registry's official photographer. The photograph would, across the following century, become, by the slow gradual accumulation of historical reference, the standard reproduction in the Empire's senior school textbooks that depicted the moment at which the Han clan's quiet ascendancy in the eastern capital became, in the Empire's broader political memory, formal. Lu Yan was, at the moment the photograph was taken, 22 years old by the body's count. He had crossed off 7 of the original 16 names by then. 9 remained. He had, by the formal alliance with the Lin family and the formal recognition of Mei Hua and the formal designation of his own succession to the Han Patriarchy, the operational infrastructure he had been building since the morning he had woken in this body. The infrastructure would carry him, across the next 7 decades of careful work, through the completion of the remaining 9 names, through the slow patient consolidation of the Han clan's position among the 4 great families, through the eventual replacement of the Imperial Registry's senior administrators with operators of the new system Wei, Bo had named on the morning of the Black Wolf, and through the long quiet management of the Empire's broader political reorganization that his father had begun and that he would, by his father's eventual succession, complete. The infrastructure would, in the end, become, across the 70-year arc he had laid out at the Eastern Study on his first day in this body, exactly the operational position the 4 great families' senior intelligence offices had spent centuries assuming none of them would ever live to see. The position would be the Han clans. The Han clans would be his. Part 4. The Long Quiet. Chapter 12. The List completed. The remaining 9 names took 11 years. The pace was deliberate. Lu Yan, with his father's coordination and Lin Shui's increasingly senior role in the Han clan's intelligence operations and Wei Bo's parallel work inside the Imperial Registry, conducted the removals in the slow, careful manner of a senior operator who had, by the past 3 years of work, registered that the broader operational arc was longer than the list. The list was the catalyst. The arc was the work. The cousins Han Bin, Han Mo, and Han Zhu were removed from the clan's junior generation across the first 2 years of the 11, by operational sequences that drew on the precedent of Han Zhu's original removal and that each cousin's own subsequent behavior had, by Lu Yan's patient cultivation of their individual operational mistakes, made entirely defensible by the clan's internal protocols. The 3 academy classmates who had been among the original 16, Wu Shi, Lu Tai, and Ma Bo, all sons of mid-tier noble families, were removed across the 3rd and 4th years by operational maneuvers that involved their own family's internal politics rather than direct intervention from the Han clan. By the end of the 4th year, None of the three were any longer in the academy. None of the three would, in their subsequent careers, achieve any operational standing in the Eastern Capital's senior politics. The four members of the other three great families on the original list took longer. The four were senior figures, two from the Bai family, one from the Wu family, and one from the Lin family, who had been operating against the Lin family's main line from a junior branch position before Lin Shui's marriage to Liu Yin had brought him into the partnership's intelligence radar. The four were removed across the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th years by operations that drew on the Lin-Han alliance's combined intelligence operations, and that, in 3 of the 4 cases, involved cooperation from senior elders within the target's own family. The 3 imperial court figures, court officials whose long, quiet hostility to the Han clan had, across the past decade, become an operational drag on the clan's broader work, were the last. They were removed across the 9th, 10th, and 11th years. The removals required the careful cultivation of internal court politics that Wei Bo's parallel network had been preparing for years, and that, by the 11th year, produced exactly the openings the operations needed. The 11th year was Liu Yin's 33rd by the body's count. The original list of 16 was complete by the autumn of that year. Liu Yin registered the completion at the 3rd bell of evening on the day the last court official's formal demotion paperwork was filed at the Imperial Registry's central office. He registered it from his writing desk in the Han clan's eastern study, which he had inherited by his father's gradual transfer of operational responsibilities across the past decade, as his own working office. He sat for a long count after the courier delivered the paperwork's confirmation. Then he stood up, walked across the study to a small lacquered box on the side table, opened the box, took out the folded sheet of rice paper he had written the original list on across the long first night in his room at age 18, and held it in his hand for a moment. He carried it to the brazier in the corner of the room. He set it on the coals. The paper caught. It burned cleanly across about 30 seconds. He watched it burn until there was nothing left. He went back to the desk. He picked up the brush. He drew a fresh sheet of rice paper from the drawer. He smoothed it. He began to write a new list. The new list had no names on it. The new list had operational priorities. 8 of them. They were the operational priorities of the next 7 decades. The gradual replacement of the Imperial Registry's senior administrators with operators of the new system. The formal integration of the 4 great families' intelligence operations into a single coordinated structure, the slow, careful reform of the Empire's relationship with the 9 rifts that had, for 8 decades, been managed by a defensive doctrine the new system was prepared to replace with a more operationally aggressive one, and 5 additional items that ran across the same time horizon. The 8 items were the work of his next 70 years. He folded the new list. He sealed it in a fresh lacquered box. He set the box on the side table where the previous list box had sat. He sat back down at the writing desk. Mei Hua came in at the 4th bell with the evening's dinner tray. She had been doing this, coming into the Eastern study at the 4th bell with the dinner tray for the past 11 years. She did not, by their long arrangement, knock. She did not, by the same arrangement, set the tray down without first stopping at the desk and resting her hand for a moment on the back of Liu Yan's neck. She did it now. She said, Han Wei. Mei Hua. The list. Complete. The new list is in the box on the side table. New list. 8 items. 70 years. She rested her chin briefly on the top of his head. She said quietly, "You are going to outlive most of us with the work you have planned." Most. Not all. The senior partner's cultivation transfer that the reverse core makes available will extend your own life and Lin Shui's life by approximately the same scale as my own. The 3 of us will, by the projection, complete the 70 years together. And the children, by the cultivation transfer extending to their own bases, also extended. Han Liang at 18 has, by his most recent cultivation assessment, the 2nd standard rank. The other 4 are at their age-appropriate levels. They will all, by my projection, reach the 7th rank by their 40th year. They will all extend to approximately 180 years of active life. They will, in the 70 years ahead, become the clan's senior operators of the new system. The clan's continuity is, by the past decade's work, secure for the next 2 centuries. She rested her hands on his shoulders. She said, "The last name." The last name was crossed off at the 3rd bell this evening. The list is done. How does it feel? He looked up at her. He said, slowly, "It feels like work that has been completed correctly. I am, Mei Hua, registering that the work has been the same work, from the morning of the duel with Han Ju to this evening's paperwork, the same work across 13 years. The work has been the precise application of operational discipline to the removal of obstacles. The obstacles were, at the start, the 16 people who had hurt the body's previous tenant. The obstacles became, across the years, the broader structural pieces of the Eastern capital's politics that needed to be moved out of the way for the new system to develop. The work has been the same work. The list's completion is, by my honest assessment, a checkpoint, not a conclusion. The 8 items on the new list are the same work continuing. The continuation will run for the rest of my life." She held his shoulders. She said, "The rest of your life. The rest of my life." She kissed the top of his head. She said, "Eat your dinner, Han Wei. Lin Shui is in the Western Pavilion with the 4 younger children. She has asked me to tell you that she would like you to join the family for the evening tea after dinner. The children have been asking when you would have an evening free for them. I have told them tonight." He looked at her. He said, "Thank you, Mei Hua. You are welcome." She rested her hand on the back of his neck one more time. She left. He ate his dinner. He finished the day's correspondence at the 5th bell. He went to the Western Pavilion to join his family for evening tea. The pavilion was warm. The lamps were lit. Lin Shui was on the central cushion, in the casual home robe she wore in the family's private hours. The 4 younger children, 3 girls and a boy, ages between 6 and 15, all by Lin Shui and Mei Hua in alternation across the past 16 years, were on the floor cushions around her with their schoolwork and their tea. Han Liang, 18 now, was reading in the corner. The boy looked up when Lu Yin came in. He set the book down. He stood up. The precise courtesy his mother had taught him at the age the borrowed memories of Han Wei had registered his own father not teaching him, and bowed. He said, "Father." Lu Yin looked at his eldest son in the lamp's light. He had not, in the morning he had woken in this body 15 years ago, expected to be the father of an 18-year-old who would, at any standard cultural register, recognize him as father and bow to him in his own home pavilion in the middle of the evening tea. He returned the bow. He said, "Liang." He sat down on the cushion beside Lin Shui. The evening continued.